All right. Good morning. We will call our 10 a.m. meeting, special budget work session to order. We welcome all those who are joining us in person, those who may be remote. Most of the council members are here. I think Mayor Pro Tem won't be joining us today. He may call if necessary, but he sent some of his wishes to us via email, and we'll add that into the discussion. So, all right, with that, because we're talking about money, we're talking about budget, we're going to need some prayer. So let's see who's taking us. We'll get Reverend Jones down there. Maybe he can lead us to the throne.
All right, let us pray. Father, we thank you now for this time and opportunity once again that you've given us to come before you. We ask for wisdom and knowledge as it relates to this budget, Father, as we go through the fiscal matters of this city. We thank you for wisdom, God. We thank you for consensus. And we thank you, God, for open minds, even as we make decisions, God, that may be tough, God. We thank you that they will ultimately benefit the residents of this city. Amen.
Amen. All right, thank you, Councilmember Jones. Council, we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Council, with that, we will move to 4.0 the approval of the agenda. If we could have a motion to approve, we'll work off our sure system.
So move.
There's a motion by Councilman Alejandros, seconded by Hare. All right, Council, look to you for your votes to approve the agenda. All right, looks like that's unanimous. Are those voting? 5.1 is the review of community investment. So,
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Jeff, if I can, I'll start us off. Council, I want to start by thanking you all for your thoughtful questions. We may need to talk to our folks, Jody, about the sound. Lachelle? I want to thank y'all for your thoughtful questions. Want to thank you for the council members who participated with me on Doug in the District. We have another edition tonight. The budget exercises that we have been doing at those have been very instrumental, and I think very telling as well. Before the meeting started, I'd been having a thought and had a brief conversation with a few members of council around this year's budget, recommended budget that myself and the team put forward to council. And in no particular order, and with no snark, I say this, that when we look outside our door right now, when you wake up in the morning, the level of services that we enjoy and have enjoyed over this current fiscal year. Everything, all of the staff members that you see, and again, services that we provide, that is included in the recommended budget and can be provided without a tax rate increase. So when we presented the budget to you, we told you we had built it in with several kind of breakaway panels is what I call them. And they're, for 1 penny, you get this on operations. For 1 penny, you get this on capital. For 2 pennies, you get this on capital. But again, when we woke up this morning, we look outside our door at the services. So as we were driving here, everything that we are currently doing, we could, as the mayor would say, tighten our belts and adjust, and it can be included in the budget without a tax rate increase. We still have got to find something for the parking that we talked about, the $544,000, and we talked about changes to maybe the fee structure or the timing of that to give us projections that would allow us to get some cover over the next 12 months, and there may be some other adjustments that we would make. But again, the budget could be balanced without a tax rate increase. So why is there a tax rate increase? There's a tax rate increase because the council and the community have consistently said, we want to do more, or we want to do more quicker. And that reality of that we can't just stay where we are. We've got to make investments, got to make smart investments. We can't delay sidewalks. We can't delay paving projects. We can't delay capital projects year after year because the cost goes up. If we're going to have a program to take care of one way in and one way out neighborhoods, we got to fund that above what just the study amount does at the moment. If we want to talk about use of technology, we've got to fund that beyond what we're currently doing at the moment. And that's where the tax rate increase is at. But what is built into that base budget, again, that would not require a tax rate increase is something that I think is really built around this simple principle, which is, finish what we started, protecting those resources, what's most important to us, and completing a plan. And that plan was to make sure that we took care of the salaries and wages for employees. We got parity on the 401k, and that is in the base budget. That's in the base budget. Mr. Yates is one of the questions he has. I think it came from, can't remember exactly what it was, about what's in other appropriations. In other appropriations, I think it was $4.91 million. That includes honoring the step plans that we have made to fire and police and 911. What is in that $4.91 million is also adjustments to the pay for all other city employees and the 1% for 401k or deferred compensation for all other employees to get parity, to finish the plan that we made to get parity with the sworn police officers who are mandated by state law that we give them 5%. And so those are the things that were in the base budget. And as we work through that, as always though, the staff is here if there are changes that you wish to make, even in the 49, as I talked about, in the base budget with no tax rate increase. But if we contemplate doing more than is in the recommended budget, which includes 3 cents, 2 on capital and 1 on operating, I would ask you all to also, just before you give us that final direction, to take a look at all of the departmental budget pages which are in your book and see what was requested but not recommended. So there's a lot of stuff that the departments believe are needed for us to put us in a good place for the future, making smart investments, that when we had to sit down to balance the budget, we simply could not consider. But if you're planning to add, if you're contemplating, which is your choice, always, this is your budget now, to add more, I would say that in addition to, it's my police chief here? He and I have had conversations about smart technology in the police department. But I've also had a lot of great conversations with Sheila about what she needs in her department. Talked a lot of great conversations what Willie needs in his and what Kevin Dove needs in his department. And so as we're talking about adding things in which are not in the recommended budget, even with a tax rate increase, not saying that you can't pick or choose. It's your choice. But if you're going to open up the wish book and let people start putting stuff in, I want to make sure that we have that robust conversation as well about those items too. But again, I'm going to close on this, Mayor, and turn it to Jeff to start the presentation. And he's never as long-winded as I am. The budget that is in front of you, there's nothing in here that I think that anyone finds objectionable, largely in part. There may be 1 or 2 things you want us to stop doing, but I don't think there's anything in there for the majority of you that you would say we should not be doing that. If anything, you want us to do more. You want us to do more Home Buyers Hero. You want us to do more transportation, more transit. And I'm actually talking longer so that our PowerPoint slides and stuff could come too. So that was a little method to the madness.
I got a question, so
Yes, sir.
you don't have to talk so long.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't just
I
say that
appreciate
there are
you.
questions
I
that need
appreciate
to
you,
be
Dr. Hare.
asked.
Yeah.
Just wanted to go back, just one more time. First, my perspective, please never think that my complaint or concern is about not improving technology for our first responders, our great staff. I mean, all of you all are our boots on the ground. I mean,
Yes, sir.
you guys get out there and get it done. But I've been saying that. I mean, that's not a new statement that I say, but I still have to say what I hear. And earlier, I wanted to share a text, and I could not find it, but I have it now. And it just said this right here, because you said, well, what do the people, I mean, there's no reason to have a complaint about the budget. Something, kind of paraphrasing what you said. And this gentleman sent me this. He says, and this is at 6:30. He says, I know you are well. I appreciate your effort to keep the tax increase low or no increase at all. Hope to talk to you about this soon. Every community watch meeting that I go to, this is what I've been talking about the last couple of weeks. Last night with Summer Hill, I went through it. I mean, I just shooting it out there. We didn't did a quick crime thing and boom, I was on point. And yes, our citizens, they do appreciate what we do, the services that they feel. But at the same time, it's heavy. It's a heavy carry for those, especially when you get a certain age and you're not working, you're not doing overtime. That 2 or 3% that you get for increase for family life or whatever you call it every year, it ain't worth nothing. Just a few dollars to get ate up by insurance or Medicare, something, this and that. Our folks are hurting. We was just filling now 26, 27 tax revals that are on the backs of our people. And so it's not that we don't support. Please, God, if you think that, you got it all real twisted. But these are the concerns that I hear, and I know my colleagues hear, and we have to put those out there. That's why I have been so much against a tax increase.
Yes, sir.
Of any kind. Now, the 8.9 million
And yes, sir,
unused.
if I can, Jeff is going to cover
Okay,
those.
because y'all didn't do me right about responding the last meeting.
Here's, Council, let's talk about the flow of things today. Mr. Manager, you and Jeff, Mr. Yates will continue to explain the budget to us. If y'all can cut down on the selling points to us, right? Because you've turned it in, we're reading it. Today, I hope we cover more questions than convincing us of why you did it. We've spent the first 2 or 3 meetings understanding why. We got that, and you gave us a nice 15-minute recap about why. We get it. Service levels are high. We're doing a great job. But in order to do any more, just kind of paraphrasing this, that these are the things that justified the recommendation. But at some point, we've got to turn it over from recommendation to let the council get to where we are. So we've kind of had some tongue-in-cheek along the way of saying, hey, we want to see some things. We want to capture that list of what we add, okay? We also need to make a list of what we want to take out. And then, council, if we can, at the end of this, I want to recommend another meeting a week from today to clean up. Like, they were expecting an adoption by the 8th. I don't think that's going to happen, but we need to go through a list of what we want to see that's not in here and a list of what we say we want to take out that's not in here. And then we've got to get on the same page and then give them time to turn it around and to make it into a document that we can adopt or continue to change. But we got to June 30, so we're not under some falsified timeline, but, you know, of course, we all want to get it done. But we do need more presentation, less commentary. Let us get to that, because, you know, I've heard this from several council members that we leave the meetings with a lot of information coming in, but not our stuff getting captured going out. All right, and so if we can hit that, let's try to keep it on task. And then when we ask a question, please keep it within a couple of minutes so that we can have time to
Mr. Mayor.
cover a lot of ground.
I move that we schedule a meeting for next Thursday, 10 a.m. That's June 4th, I believe.
All right. Well, thank you, and I'll circle to that, council, and seconded by Hare. Discussion on that?
Yeah, discussion. I
Yes,
do have
sir.
a conflict. There are some things that I'm willing to put on the table today in terms of building that consensus, especially in terms of looking at what can be cut. So I would like to get into that conversation today, but I do have a conflict that will prevent me from being here a week from today.
Okay, all right, noted. Yes, sir. Any other comments? All right, show of hands or share system on adding that additional meeting, because I was gonna do it as a special meeting, but y'all taking care of it, so that's great. Show of hands. It'll be a week from today. All right. All right. Those opposed?
Mr. Mayor?
Man, sir, man. And we'll get what all we cover on.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. So, but this is just for calendar purposes. Okay, all right. So it passed, those voting in opposition. I know Councilman McMillan had a conflict, but I didn't see how you voted. Were you for or against it?
It's a no for me. My
Okay.
nephew graduates a week
Okay,
from today.
congratulations. All right. And who was the second no? There was only one? All right. All right, they got it. All right, Mr. Yates, turn it over to you, sir, and we'll try to, council will get him. Mr. Yates, how many areas are you covering? Are you covering questions now, or what are you doing?
Before we get into responses to the Budget Chronicles.
Attorney Michaels.
Nope. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Before we get into the Budget Chronicles and review of the tax rate recommendation, we have some conversation and want to just highlight the conversation around community safety and investment. But then the rest of it is providing back information that we've been asked for. And some of the community safety investment is information we've been asked for. So all of the information we've put together and brought to you is in response to questions from council
So the
members.
review of the tax information, even though I know that's been an ongoing thing, is this a continuation of some areas that you haven't covered, or is this a review of the review that we've already heard?
No, sir, it's a restatement, but we continually get asked about reductions and where those reductions would come from. Well, so it's been a repetitive question that's been asked, so we felt like for the public's purposes, because keep in mind, this is part of our engagement, part of our transparency, we wanted to restate for clarity what the recommendation is, because as the manager pointed out, the budget can be balanced at 0-cent tax increase. That's not a problem. You have options, but there are trade-offs in that process. So
Right,
that
but
was the clarity.
I just wanted to be clear that all of it's a recommendation. So in other words,
That's correct.
What you wanted to use the penny for, and you presented today to say that the penny would be for this specific thing, doesn't mean that it would be for that specific thing. The source of funds could come from somewhere else. So that's what I'm saying, that I know we've captured that, and that's why I want to see, because I wasn't here last Thursday, I want to see, was this picking it up from where you left off, that you didn't get a chance to do that, or you recapping all that again? Because I don't think that's a good use of time today to go back over what you would use a penny for, 2 pennies for. Like, we've got that in the first couple of meetings.
We're responding to the questions
Okay,
of the
so-
council because we've been asked.
So it's questions
How
that
would
you
you reduce
responded
the
to.
tax rate, or how would you, Councilman Hare pointed out, keep the tax rate low? Well,
Oh, yeah,
there's
so-
the path. Here is the path that we have laid out and what we would recommend doing that. You're absolutely right. It's a recommendation. At this point, though, this is the best recommendation. So if we continue to get questions about how can we get the penny down, we want to show you this is what we would recommend to do that. You, Mayor, absolutely, if you want to do something different, council can do something different. But we continually get asked, what's the trade-off, or how would you reduce that 3-cent recommended tax
So to be clear, you're going
increase?
through the questions that council sent you. There's 20, 25, 26 questions. That's what you're about to cover.
There's a little over 30.
Okay.
We're going to cover those today.
Okay.
But also some of them are covered with these couple of pieces. So for transparency and to be sure it's on the table for your conversation, we wanted to reiterate and get through those because we've done it in pieces. This is really the end of our conversation with you.
Okay.
And the information we want to give you. And then to your point, we will turn it over both Monday and apparently next Thursday for you to hone in with the hope of trying to get to adoption on the 8th so that we can get it ready for July 1. So, but I wanted to kind of cover a question around community safety because the council's asked a lot about the 38 positions and investment in community safety. But much like parking or the downtown investment and much like transit, the question becomes sustainability. How do you continue down the path we are on right now and have sustainable? We talked about how revenue is not growing as fast as expenditures. how we are making those investments. So I just want to pose this question. We're certainly not going to answer this question completely today, but we believe that as we go through before we get into our next strategic planning cycle and our next budget, we have to have some of these conversations with you as a council so you can give us policy direction. So how can Fayetteville make the right investments in police, fire, mental health, youth, and neighborhood programs to create a safer community in a way that is effective, sustainable, and responsive to those changing community needs? I added some additional questions for you just to kind of ponder. What level of investment is needed to maintain current services and meet growing demand? I'm going to show you in just a second kind of what our investment's been. How should the city balance those investments? Is it traditional public safety? Because when we talk about community safety, we're talking about an umbrella. It ranges from parks and recreation youth programs to code enforcement to traditional fire and police. What role does technology play in that? We've put a lot of money into technology recently. Where is the return on investment? How do you calculate and analyze return on investment? There are metrics to look at that. How long do you wait? Technology is leading. Technology is evolving. Do you want to be front side technology? Do you want to be a late implementer to ensure that it's efficient and effective? Or do we want to be experimental in that space? And what's the return on that? Does that buy you more? Does it reduce the stress on your existing resources? How should mental health, homelessness, and youth programs impact? I can tell you from our Doug in the districts, we've done 3 budget exercises now with them. We're going to do another one tonight. 2 of the 3, the number one thing they said is deal with homelessness. The number one thing. Now, granted, it's a limited sample. It's a focus group sample, so I wouldn't suggest it's scientific, but that's kind of what they've said. Youth programs. How are we going to support the community? How does that fit into your community safety? Really what it boils down to is, where do you invest in preventive? Where is that line? Preventive versus reactive. Traditional law enforcement, from a public policy perspective, focuses on reactive. There is a certain amount of crime and a certain amount of involvement that's going to happen naturally. It's the nature of humans. But where is that line? What is that return on investment? What does our investment look like? What funding strategies are there to make it sustainable? How are we going to continue to do that? And then finally, how should we measure success? Crime rates, using the FBI crime statistics, is one way. I can tell you they're a measure of incidents. So if you stop arresting people, your crime will go down to some degree. But how do you measure that? So I wanted to kind of pose this question to council, and we don't have to spend a lot of time, to the mayor's point, talking about it today, but it's worth talking about. Because when we look at it, how have we invested? So from 2022, you spent $91 million, almost $92 million on what we would call community safety operations. This doesn't include code enforcement or all those other things in Parks and Recreation I was just talking about. This is straight up fire, police, and OCS. $92 million, the recommended budget for those operations in 2027. This doesn't include the step increase. Just to continue those operations, $120 million. That is a $28.1 million increase, or a 31% increase. At the same time, your main source of revenue, your ad valorem taxes and sales taxes, have gone from $131 million to $150 million. We'll call it 151. So that growth of 18.9 million, the difference between those two numbers came from somewhere else in the operating budget. Okay? So
Does that factor in any grants received? Is that total cost?
This is only the expenditure side. So it doesn't include grants, which these three units don't get a lot of grant. They get grants, but this would be general fund. Those would be accounted for somewhere else.
I got
So
you. So
that
I
would
guess
add
my
to
question, my question is, the 120 million total budget,
Yep.
is some of that covered with grants?
No, sir, not a material amount. No, sir. The grants are
None.
covered somewhere else.
So this doesn't cover any grant, factor in any grants? Safe neighborhood grants, crime commission grants, no federal, state?
I do not believe so. Those are covered in Fund 26.
Can you get a definitive answer for me on that? Not now, but
We can absolutely, Sarah, am I correct in saying that?
Yes, there is one grant match budgeted in PD, but there's no actual grant budgeted.
so if you got a grant match coming out of that, that means that you're matching anticipation of a grant, right?
Yes, sir, the juvenile restitution program, there's about $16,000 budgeted for that match.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So,
Mr. Mayor, I got a question on that too.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but it's general community safety. I've got some questions about fire and police, so it could be maybe parking lot for another next Thursday or whatever. But you mentioned a lot there, Mr. Yates, in addition to the Doug in the district and the exercise with the funding and where residents would allocate funding if they were sitting in these seats maybe. And one that you mentioned, and one that the ones I attended also had homelessness as a heavy one. When I have conversations with the residents though and dig deeper, because I think we're all willing to fund a program or an initiative that has a proof of concept, right? So we travel, we go to NCLM, we go to NLC, and we take different workshops for different things. And all of the ones I've sat in, and there's been multiple, at least 3 for homelessness and mental health, and what peer cities, typically what cities do, what counties do, what nonprofits do, typically municipalities do not own and operate shelters. They may partner with. So from what I was able to ascertain from the workshops I attended was that kind of best practices, if you will, or what's most common for municipalities is we fund a day resource center or whatever you want to call it, but basically our Fayetteville Cares now, I think is what it's called. So we've done that, right? So when I press residents, because as we often say, government's not always the solution. So it has to be a partnership between staff, it has to be a partnership between the elected public servants and the residents. And that partnership on the resident side could be individual residents or it could be nonprofits, right? So when I press them like, hey, we want to fund, as a city, you want us to fund more, focus more, or prioritize more homelessness, what program? And the short answer is that they don't know, right? So I say that to say, while that's important, I think, again, having those private, difficult, hard conversations, like what is it with homelessness specifically that you want us to prioritize? And it's just the fact that homelessness exists, they don't like it, they want us to throw money at it so it goes away. And that's kind of what a lot of residents don't want to say publicly, but that's the reality of it. So I say that to say, I just looked at, and I haven't dug into the county's budget, but I just read an article this morning where they're eliminating 76 out of 77 positions. 76 of them are in social services and health department. So, we had talked about consolidated 911, which I have some questions again for fire and police regarding that. And some of those services, if we consolidated that, was some mental health. So we're trying to do some of that through our OCS. When do we start having those tough conversations? Because we're not going to be able to solve all these issues alone. So we have to start delineating with our partners on the county, with nonprofits, who's doing what, right? And then we can come up with a joint strategy on how we can try to fund those things. But whenever is appropriate, Mr. Mayor, I do have a fire question. I don't know if that's now or later.
All right, circle back to you. Councilman McMillan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to speak to your points around homelessness, and I appreciate that this is coming on the table. There has been a call for us to build our capacity in terms of sheltering for years now. I just go back to February of this year when we had issues around white flag shelters and lack of capacity in terms of beds. And we talked about, in that moment, we talked about how we weren't equipped to resource additional beds. There was a lot of emergency movements that happened, especially on the part of the county, in order to make up the shortfall. And when I go to a Doug in the district and I see the citizens, the residents of Fayetteville, talk about how that's a priority. When I see them consistently put that as number one and number two, it matches with what I've heard over the years, and I'm talking over the last 10 years or so. And I do think we are at the point where we start to look at studies of what it takes to have those resources and be able to answer that on the part of the city. If you look at cities like, I know you like the pure comparisons, and you like to look at like-sized North Carolina cities. So just look at a Durham or look at a Greensboro and see that they do put more resources. The cities put more resources towards homelessness and addressing that. And I think that many of our residents, I can't say most, would want to put resources towards a study that looks at us having our resources at the city in terms of the unhoused, and would rank that over a convention center at this point in time. That's not trying to. I know. I see you right there.
Yeah. Stay off of that one.
That wasn't to
You got to
stir
pay for those
stir
services.
your pot.
With taxes. So,
But I
No,
would
homeless
say
shelter
that
is great
if
thing.
we can't ignore what we've heard repeatedly, and then also we can't put people's lives at risk as well. If we've heard this repeatedly for the last 10 years and we fail to act, and then when it comes to time to talk about resources, we kick the can down the road or punt effectively again, then that's negligence on our part.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
all right, guys, we got a lot of ground to cover.
So
but
that's some of the voices,
it
right?
sounds
But
like there's two items for the board
There's
right there.
there's a flip side to that where residents say, hey, you've done more than your share. Where are the other partners? Where are the county? Where are the nonprofits? You know, same as, I'm not picking on homelessness issue. Same thing with when we talk about funding festivals. They're like, what role does the city have in funding festivals? So for everyone that wants to support the great festivals we have, for everyone that wants to support homelessness and other things, there's several that don't want to do those things. So it's not, as we said, those aren't scientific.
Yeah, but don't ignore what we're hearing, though. Don't ignore what we're hearing
All
from the
right,
citizens.
that sounds good. So we got two items, it sounds like. And in both of those examples, I think you got valid points. In both of those examples, Guilford County and Durham County have something. Right now, we don't have anything from Cumberland County here in terms of overnight shelter stay. I think that's the big piece. And they're trying to catch up with that, not throwing them under the bus. But that has the impact of, I think, what causes the original concern when residents go to shopping centers or they have issues behind their house because of campsites or have a tragedy like you had the other day. They say, what are y'all doing for homelessness? And, you know, we're unique because all those other counties have some overnight shelter. I mean, we partner with Salvation Army, but that's not enough for a county this big. But good issues. We're hoping to save that. Who's tracking our board? And we would like to have it visible so we can make sure at the end of the meeting we can recap it. It doesn't have to be you. You presenting.
There is a slide at the end, but we can get somebody from the
Yeah, we
budget
need
team to write the
some
slide
notes before.
up on the board.
So it's homeless initiative for discussion as a add or a takeaway or move around from something else. And I think that's what the basis of that. Y'all were just making the case on both sides of that.
Yeah, could we also add the specificity around shelter, around overnight shelter?
Well,
Let's
so
look at it.
we'll catch it. We're not going to try to solve what goes on the board. We just want to make sure we capture what's on the board for the follow-up meeting. All right. So homelessness was prioritized. It was mentioned as stated. Mr. Yates, let's go. You got about 30 minutes to run through the rest of your
Yes, sir.
item.
But thank you, Councilman Hondros, for bringing that up, because I think that that's the conversation. You know, step back from the budget, as the mayor always says, it's policy and budget. Well, budget flows from policy. So the question then becomes, and we'll get the parking lot written back up. It's also on slide 61 in your handout is the parking lot items. But to have that conversation, and with the county's changes and with and that investment, it's really a question as to where does the city want to go. We're kind of at a crossroads, right? So I will leave that there. If that's all the discussion that you would like to have today, we can certainly move on to that, and we'll schedule more time as we go forward with our strategic planning.
Councilmember Green has something. And I think what prompted that, though, Jeff, and that's where I'm saying the commentary, right? Because what you did, you posed against whether the spending if we've done enough for public safety, and what does the spending or the investment in public safety look like, and you even mentioned the word return that we've gotten on that. So those, to me, are more policy than than numbers, but the numbers are good. But go ahead, Councilmember Green.
My question's really on this next slide, so if you have something more to present, I can ask it after that.
Well,
You might answer it.
Yeah, and I'm just want to say, Amira, I agree with you.
It's-
And ma'am,
Sorry.
on the
I'm
next
sorry,
page.
it was on, he switched slides, but mine is on that
On
slide.
this slide, I'm happy to answer a question.
Okay. And I think you said this in a prior meeting, but we've said so much that I want to make sure I captured it in my brain correctly. The fiscal year 2026 versus fiscal year 2027 for the OCS. Can you please explain those differences? Because it appears that it's a decrease, but I think
sir.
that we discussed it was not an actual decrease.
Yes, ma'am. I can be happy to. So if you go back to the actual expenditures in 2025, for instance, we've been ramping this program up and hiring a director. I don't see John Jones here today. If you are, John, wave your hand at me. I don't see him. Okay, thank you. So as we went in and as the council allocated money, we put a dollar value to that operation. $2.3 million was the original. The 2.463 that's in there as revised budget includes some micro grants and that kind of stuff that council added. The discussion around that was, we're not sure what that program looks like, but here's a comparable amount to other places. As we have fleshed out the programming and as we have started down that road, we've said, okay, now we want 2 mental health response units. John's starting to plan out his staff and ramp that up. We believe that the 2.2 million essentially is sufficient for him to do his programming. It's not a reduction in programming. It's a true budget of what he's going to do over that time. As with all directors, they always have a list of additional things they want to do. The full build out of OCS is in your questions. We'll cover that in a little while. But this is the next year's recommendation for him to continue his operations and continue to build that out with actual dollars put to the activities he wants to do. So it's not it's not like we're losing something. It's just really now getting it, really getting the numbers and putting them on paper to be what we'd expect them to be, not just a plug number, if you will. Does that answer your
That
question?
answers it, and the minute you said what you said, it was like a placeholder figure, I remembered exactly. But I think the public perception is that we are reducing his budget when in fact it just is more a clear-cut our program number as based against maybe that was a Durham program number or a Kannapolis program number, whoever has it, Greensboro, Winston-Salem. So that was my concern. Thank you.
Follow up on OCS.
Okay.
So I get the kind of a true up number, right? So we looked at the actual for 26 and that's kind of what we're basing the budget for 27. Is that what I'm hearing? More or less?
More or less.
So how does that impact the department's ability to grow, to expand? Because all I'm hearing is we want expansion on mental health and some of those things that we've had the pillars for OCS. So I appreciate we're truing up the number based on what we know we can get out the door, but also is that leaving the capacity to expand those services as is, I think, council's priority?
No, I know that in conversations that John has had with members of the community and even members of council, that's been has been a question that everyone has. If you were to count on one hand the number of cities that have anything that's related to OCS, you would still have a finger or maybe two that would be left. John and his team are doing amazing work, and I can promise you that if John came in and he had a grant, he said we have an opportunity to hire someone to do homelessness outreach or intervention, we would bring that back to y'all. We absolutely would. But when we sat down and we created a game plan of how we would build out the 4 pillars, Councilman Hondros nailed it appropriately. It is how much can we physically do in 1 year. We talked to the police department. We didn't freeze the 38 positions because we didn't value the police officers. We froze it because we realized that there was no way with 25 people in an academy and with the attrition we had that we would be able to fill all 38 positions in 1 year. And that's, may I remember that whole conversation. So it's the same with John. If we put more money in this budget, it would be at the end of the year either money that went out the door without us doing our due diligence and making sure that we have built a foundation under it, or it would be unspent and at the end of the year it would roll back to fund balance. What we've done is try to do a balanced approach. If we were going to add more money, I think we could add another mental health crew. But I also want proof of concept. I want to know what that looks like. I want to know what these first two teams, are we able to find people in the market? Y'all remember the struggle we had to even find a director. And I think we all now see that John was more than worth the wait for it. So that was one. The other that I would point out to here is, as the mayor said, y'all ain't getting questions from the public about public safety is number one in our mind. Public safety is number one in our mind. The only reason that Jeff gave that slide, not the only reason, but the main reason is that when people ask you, what am I getting for this? In the last 5 years, this council has consistently prioritized public safety. $28 million increase. That is more than the budget of Hope Mills, Spring Lake, Eastover, Falcon, Wade, and Godwin combined. So when people ask you where your priorities are, you have done that. Now, we're not saying that to say that you haven't done enough. We're giving y'all all the credit to say you're putting the public's interest where it goes. You're also putting the public's interest on sidewalks, on striping, on paving, on all those other things which are in the budget as well. But that slide basically shows that your revenues, of your main revenues, are growing and are 14.4%, and the recommended budget, which again can be balanced without a tax rate increase, as I talked about at the beginning. And this doesn't even include, I don't think, Jeff, the 38 frozen positions.
Does not include the frozen
It does not
positions.
include drones as first responders or other things like the ladder company for the police, for the fire department and other things like that. So I think this is a moment that y'all should, a moment of pride. And when you're talking to residents, tell them we hear you. Y'all are doing it. That's impressive. That is impressive. And Jeff, looking at the other slides too, on the 1 penny and 2 penny to keep the mayor's interest alive as well, you may just want to refer to those. And I don't know if my note to you was clear that in the additional 1 penny, and this is really for the council, it's not saying that if you don't do the 1 penny, we won't do striping. Striping is in.
There is some striping. So, and if I could, I'll get to that. So I just wanted to kind of remind the council of where we were as the questions about how do we get to reduction of that 1 penny tax rate, and what does that look like? So kind of going back, when we asked directors, we said, what do you think you need to move the city forward and continue current operations? They said that number was about $240.3 million. When we said, okay, well, what do you need just to continue the current operations as you are? Not unfreeze 38 positions, not add drones as first responders, not add a ladder company, not add more planning and development staff, not add anything else. But other than the mental health, the 2 mental health units, which were really taking up space that had not been programmed, that's about 227.4. What's recommended to you with the tax rate increase is about 215.4. So how did we close that gap? Well, first, we went back through, we deferred, delayed, and denied operating budget requests. When you combine all of those in the general fund, it's about $15 million. The estimated vacancy savings, we said, okay, we believe we're going to have vacancies next year of about 8.9 million. So we're going to take that off the top. To your question, Dr. Hare, that's accounted for in the recommended tax rate and the recommended budget. Now, if the chief gets down to 9 vacants in the police department, then that number is going to come down significantly. The city has relied on, and Mayor, this isn't commentary, this is reality. The city has relied on vacancies in public safety to keep the tax rate low. And that if we get to full staffing in PD, we are already at full staffing in fire. If we get to full staffing in PD, this number will be half, give or take, of what that is. So I just want to be sure we're aware of that. We recommended fund balance usage. So we went through and combed out, line by line, everything in the budget that was one time in accordance with your fund balance policy. We said that's about 1.2 million. We said we can pay off future debt to reduce cash flow, reduce the cash need next year by using fund balance. That was another 1.2 million. We said, of those one-time items, what can be funded with 2026 dollars? We told the departments, go ahead and purchase these things. Get those spent. Then we reallocated closed CIP projects, which is one of the questions. All of these are kind of questions that have been dispersed. So I just want to be clear what we've done up to this point to balance. We reallocated closed CIP funds, $1.5 million, before we recommended 2 cents in your capital program. Then we broke up projects across years and said, what does it make sense? You can't contract for a partial project. You can't buy partial land. So we've scheduled your CIP in a way that we believe we can achieve it and do the projects in accordance with the budget. All of these things, because this has been some of the question, how do we break up CIP projects? What are the one-time items left in the budget? Those items. So we have emptied that cupboard already in balancing the budget. So I just wanted to be sure you understood, because those questions, multiple council members have asked those questions, the process that we went through to get to the recommendation of the 1 cent and 2 cent recommendations.
Councilman McMillan had his light on, and then I need to say something before you move on to the.
Yeah, I think this is an appropriate point to bring up shot spotter and sound thinking. And I won't be here on next Thursday, but we want to put that on the table as something to cut. We've had now 3 studies that have failed to conclude the efficacy that was promised up front. We even had studies prior to adopting that contract saying not only that it posed a danger in some ways to the public, but there was a lack of efficacy nationwide in its implementation. And I think if we're looking for, in the realm of public safety, places where we can move on, I think that's definitely one of them. Disappointed not to see that on the agenda after the Duke study, but that conversation absolutely needs to be had during this budget season.
All right. Thank you, sir. And just to say, we probably spent as much on the studies as their annual fee was, so we didn't have any of the catastrophe and catastrophic scare tactics that they told us were going to happen.
Artists.
But we'll put it there. In addition to any OCS changes that we need to move money around, it could be a source of funding from it. So,
Right on. Could I speak to that as well?
We're going to try to get Mr. Jeff to a point, and then we'll have a chance to. This is what I want to give some time for us to add and take away. We're not going to be able to solve what we add or take away, but we can add things. So if you add ShotSpotter, I think that's moving something from the PD side. If that's what you're saying, don't support that because I think we've got a contract and we got positive numbers the other day. But we have to look at all public safety, including OCS programs that may need to be reduced or changed. So we can put it all up there. But I want Mr. Jeff to get through. I need him to answer some of these questions that he has. So I know
Absolutely.
We're about 45 minutes in. We hadn't gotten to that point because we've been stopping you. So I want to.
Absolutely. So I'm almost there, Mayor. So the recommended tax rates, just for clarity purposes, and to kind of explain and see the impact of that, the recommended budget is 3 cent increase. As pointed out, as the manager pointed out, we can balance at 0% at the 0 tax rate increase. Those options are provided to you, and I won't go through all of them. But the impact on a $225,000 house, which is about average in Fayetteville, that's about $67 annually, or about $560 a month. Most people pay through we did the month because most people pay through their escrow. And to maintain the current services, fund FPD frozen officers, fund all the overhires and fire, and to do all the OCS build out, that total tax bill is about $140 over that time for a $225,000 homeowner. We know that nobody's exactly average, but I wanted to provide some context and help shed some light on that. So with that, Mayor, to getting to your points and to Doug's recommendation, I won't go through all of the items, but if the council so chooses to not do the tax rate increase, these next slides that show the additional penny for operations and the capital, these would be where we would take those out of the budget. We would recommend as staff that these would be the least impact places to reduce those. And to the manager's point, these aren't everything in those areas. These are the leftover bits and pieces that the directors prioritized as their last, if you will, their last bits and pieces that they if they had to maintain zero tax rate, this is where they would recommend cutting or reducing. So I won't go through every one of those, but to the mayor's point, I'll go ahead and get on to, fund balance analysis. One of the questions we had was also fund balance under this budget. And of course, this is all a projection out, 14 months from now. Really, we believe this budget keeps you just over your 12% budget. That gives you about $1 million more than what your policy level or your policy goal is. And we can talk about any details around that. But this is our initial projection and analysis at this point. This will absolutely change based on actuals, based on additional actuary studies, and those other things. Reminder, the key principles for the budget as we get to the discussion, Mayor, you were talking about getting to balancing. We focus on council priorities, and then our operating and capital budget principles focus on employees, maintaining services, commitments, facilities, and infrastructure. Those are the two most important things that we prioritized. High value, high impact additions, such as the mental health units, focused on finishing what we started. You can't get halfway. Finish what, next week we're cutting the ribbon on the tennis center to allow play. We had to finish that project. It was a project to get there, but we needed to finish it. Aligned with what can realistically be delivered. So it doesn't make sense to add budgetary capacity when we don't believe we're going to actually spend it or actually do it within the year that it's appropriated. Balanced and responsible planning for capital improvements over the long term. So taking care of the assets, keeping our promises is really kind of where we're at. This would be the recommended framework, council, as you talk about how you want to balance and as we go forward through the questions, which I think they'll kind of get intertwined a little bit. Maintaining the current service levels. These are decisions that you'll have to make. Do you want to maintain the service levels? What are the trade-offs to that? You can move things around. It's your budget now. Just tell us where you want those to be. What is the trade? Preserve the long-term fiscal sustainability and fund balance goal levels. One of the things we know that we've seen the state auditor come in and look at several cities around the state recently, that a structural deficit in your budget is in the long run not going to be sustainable. Okay, the LGC is not interested necessarily that you're at 12% or 16% in fund balance. Their primary interest is how fast you're burning fund balance for operations. Okay, and this budget recommends that 12.5, right around that 12% number, which is your goal. Support employee pay, benefits, and retention. It takes an entire system to operate the city. So there's been discussions about different types and different levels. So that's one of the things I think you as a council will have to wrestle with. Minimize the impacts on residents, both in the loss of service and the taxpayers in increased cost. What is the trade-off? We talk a lot about the tax side, the taxpayer discussion, but all of those residents use those services. So where do we see that trade-off? Coming back full circle to the very first question. So with that, now I'll roll through the Budget Chronicle questions. And just, I guess, stop me if you have a question on any of those questions.
Councilmember Jones, and then McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine is quick. Just something to add to the board. For me, in regards, this is definitely not to replace officers, but maybe to complement or help fill a void. I would like to add the drones as first responders to the board as a possible way to help deal with those vacancies. And of course, I'm saying that not as a subject matter expert, but definitely would welcome the input of our chief at that particular time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Councilman McMillan.
No, I just wanted to add some clarity and just double down on what I heard from at least two of my colleagues on emphasis of the ability of OCS to continue to expand. Have already heard at least a proposal for 4 additional mental health capacity or mental health response teams, and then also expansion of the CIV. And also want to point to the trend nationwide in terms of progress the cities are making in addressing the root causes of crime. really being centered on efforts like the OCS, and also want to reference for the council the cost of gun violence study that we got that said that in Fayetteville, $37 million a year is what it's costing us to not invest in that type of forward-leading initiative that looks at the root causes. And we could continue to spend at the rate of 30% increase over the last 4 years on police, or we can make the shift. And I think that now is the time to at least emphasize operationally that we want to see the expansion in terms of CIV, and then also all of the requested mental health teams.
All right, thank you. Shot spotter sounds cheap compared to that $400,000 you just said. All right, Councilmember Hare.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to, well, first let me ask, on our corridor cleanings, our edgings, we talk about that all the time. It doesn't seem to, I don't ever see it really holding a serious purpose in the city. How much do we have there presently?
Are you talking about for right-of-way maintenance?
Yeah, the street maintenance, our corridors going into our city. What? Because I wanted to see where we could look to increase or move some things from to. They just don't seem to get done properly, especially going into our city, especially within the Murchison Road corridor, going by our beautiful, beautiful improvements that we have into the city. I was just wanting to know where we were with that. And is it possible, it's not a whole lot, but I mentioned on that 26,000 for residential surveys, could we stretch that out a little in order to save that amount of money?
All right, thank you, Councilman Hare. Two things I wanted to ask. As you said before with OCS, since we didn't have a lot of the existing components, we estimated based on other levels. The amount that we're estimating to stand up the co-response, which I support that, brought that before it was an OCS, but we got $2 million set aside for something that we don't know that exists yet, or how much? What's the dollar amount for ramping that up for two teams?
It's about $540,000.
All right, so put that up because there could be an opportunity to phase into that, or to use some of these partnerships. Like, we just don't have the infrastructure for the full gamut, and so you've got Alliance here that's a $2 billion corporation that they get just for this space. And the county has some responsibility with that, to where the problem is, even if you co-respond and you pick someone up, you don't have an option of anywhere to take them. You can't take them to jail because that may not be the course of action. Hospital, of course, hospitals are now struggling with it, so they tried to open Roxy back up to clear their beds, and so that may need to be analyzed to see how quick we ramp it up and where the partnership, the end delivery is. Just appropriating $600,000-700,000. We're not going to get to it today. I just want it up there and tracking, since we're trying to belt tighten a little bit. And again, philosophically, we can't get into why the chief's numbers got a 44% reduction in homicide, right? Was it because of ShotSpotter? Was it because of proactive measures that we've done? We've done a little bit of all of it. Right. But at the end of the day, his number is what it is. So I don't think you can say public safety and the increase. If you've got 44% less homicides this year, you can ask anybody in the public, was it worth the extra money for the increase? And I think they'll answer yes.
That's what I hear.
So people want to be safe, first of all. So I think this is good stuff. But Councilman McMillan, I know it's about your third or fourth round. We're not going to get to an ideology understanding today. No. But I do need you, Mr. Jeff, to get to some questions because that's a lot of us are looking for some concrete answers. And two, I want the council to understand this. There used to be a part in our budget book, it was multiple pages that had all of the CIP projects across an Excel spreadsheet and the source of where it is. I think we got it kind of chopped up now into, and I've got my CIP book, into departments. So there's two levers. So when you say the 2 or 3% increase or continuing as is, that's continuing as is, but it doesn't show that list of things that you're looking to be paid continuing as is. Continuing as is, to me, or can you clarify, means keeping the service level where it is with no new projects, or with the projects that were already scheduled on queue to happen this year, in addition to continuing services?
So the list you're referring to, there's a schedule in your CIP document, and we'll get the page numbers for you, where all the CIP projects are laid out in total. But the prior slides that are in your presentation that I didn't go over, the 1 and 2 cents are what the 27 recommendation would be for those two pieces. So with the CIP program, we're continuing the program that council approved last year, with the exception of those listed as the 1 and 2 cents for CIP, that's where those would be essentially new projects, if you will, in the CIP. Otherwise, we're continuing the same CIP that you as a council approved last year with the multiple years. So we didn't add projects necessarily to the CIP. We didn't add projects to the CIP. We funded the ones that are there to be able to finish them, and these were the ones that were new.
So that's my point. So it wasn't just a continuation, no new change, like the makerspace. I want to add it up there. We've got a $2 million project. We got $450,000 coming for something we don't even know what we're going to do with, or have a partnership or whatever. And so I guess the council needs to decide whether that's worth prioritizing for this year, or does that help us fund some of these other one-time expenditures that are possible. But that was the kind of example I'm talking about.
Well, everything that's in the CIP is reflective of a council action. So on the makerspace, for instance, you as a council took action to say we wanted to do the makerspace at this dollar value.
Yeah,
with these
that's
plans.
how it got there. But you can take action to say it's going to be delayed, or the money's going to be
Absolutely.
reappropriated.
If you as a council wanted to reduce the rates or do something different, you'll just need to tell us so we can give you the action to reduce that project or change that project, because the best information we have is what council's told us to do.
I understand
the action.
it's not critical. I'm just trying to make sure
Sure.
council understands there's two levers that they have. You have this list of projects that you can move things around, change or delay or accelerate, and then you have the rate of what he's talking about. So his rate recommendation, he's given us what it looks like if you say the rate plus a penny or plus 2 pennies, but the rate that he has also has projects in it that you'll see on that list that previous councils had said we want the money spent this year, but you've got the option to look at that too. So I just want to make sure we're tracking the two.
Absolutely.
Two tracks.
And that's a very good point, Mayor, that you as a council, the composition of the budget and the schedule of the CIP projects can absolutely all be changed. So that's, and I'm just supporting what you're saying, Mayor, that is just something that you just need to tell us that's what you want to do.
Councilman Hare, Hondros, and McMillan.
Mr. Mayor, can I jump in before, I'm sorry, sir. I just need to clarify your point, Mayor, if I can, on the OCS. Are you saying that we would add more money to do more crews, or we would calibrate doing a little bit less this year?
What I'm
and
saying
partner with
is,
the
y'all
Alliance?
have got a figure in here based on some estimate, right, or some conclusion, to do 2 crews at the same time. Right now, none exist, okay? So if it's up there, maybe just like we didn't really have a true number, you had a true and up number, but we encumbered those funds when we started this department. We said, let's just put $3 million aside. And now you said that there's a truing up of it, so you had to explain that earlier to say that this is not really a reduction. Now that we've got an accurate number, the numbers have come down for that particular thing. Same thing for this. It's a space that we have no presence in right now as far as mental health. And you have the Alliance, who's the $2 billion coordinator of this process. You have the county, who has a component. And I just wanted up there to say, do we need to encumber all of that, or can we phase into it, maybe one crew, see how it is and how the partnerships work, and then another crew? Or you may not make any changes, but I put it up there since we're talking about it, because we're trying to solve a philosophical problem. And this is where I say the commentary comes in. We spent this much on police over here, but now we know that mental health is important, so this is what we recommended. 2 crews, both funded at the same time, even though they're none right now. So I'm not saying I'm supporting or not. I'm just making sure the council understands the lay of the land.
Absolutely.
All right. Councilmember Hondros, Hare, and McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got a question on this slide, but also, I think this is slide 19. Did we go over slide 16? I had a question on that. That was a fund balance analysis.
We did briefly, but I'll be happy to answer any question you have.
So, one question we asked last week was, out of the 322, I think, million in the proposed budget, how much of that funding is enterprise funds versus general fund? And I'm assuming, is this the 102? Is that, what's the 102 million on that top line?
So the 102 million is the total fund balance.
General fund?
The general fund only. This is only the general fund. So to your question of the 322 million, if you will, the recommended budget, give or take 219 or 215 million, all the difference is going to be capital, or not capital, I'm sorry. All the difference is going to be enterprise funds and other funds, not general fund.
Okay. Enterprise funds is how much? Like, I really want a delineation of what each enterprise fund is, and then what's that CIP or whatever else you're calling it. And the reason I ask is from a mathematical perspective. I mean, I think to the mayor and other colleagues' point earlier in the conversation, or earlier commentary, so staff has built this budget and given us 1, 2, 3, or 4 options, whereas if we have the number, council can build a budget instead of being pigeonholed to 4 options.
All right, thank you, Councilman Hondros. Councilman.
Wait, he didn't answer the question, and
waiting
then
on
I still
his
got
answer.
one on 19.
On page D14
D14, all right.
of your budget document, it goes by line through which funds the money is appropriated to.
So out of the, what's the total general fund balance? Is it 102 or is it something greater than
Are
that?
you referring to fund balance or budget? They're two different.
Budget in the general fund, how much, what's the budget for the general fund in totality?
In totality is about 215 million.
215?
Yes, sir.
And then out of that, how much is already programmed into CIP or debt?
The general fund's only operating,
So none of it.
so none of it. There's a
So
little,
what's the difference between the 215 and the 102 here?
this is fund balance. So this is your balance sheet. A budget is a plan.
Okay?
Okay, so your balance sheet represents liabilities, cash, all of your assets, all of those other things. So this is the fund balance piece of your balance sheet.
Would salaries be liabilities?
Some parts of salaries are liabilities. Not all of salaries are liabilities. So
but
the
we're
balance
saying-
sheet, where the balance sheet and the budget, the nexus is the actual revenue over expenditures, then translates into addition or subtraction of your fund balance.
So out of the 215 million general fund budget, only 102 is not encumbered, is what you're saying?
No, sir. So, and this is where kind of it's a little technical. The $215 million budget is a spending plan. Just like I'm going to get my paycheck, I'm going to pay my rent, my power bill. The 102 million represents my savings account. So in this case, my savings account, I know that of that, included are in my net assets, included in that are things I can't spend. Inventories, prepaid, I have a loan that I need to pay back. Those things, leases. I also know that I need to keep a certain amount of money because I owe my power bill at the end of the month and I need to be able to pay that.
So that's all broken down on D14?
That is not on D14.
You
What
paying
you're
that out of
referring-
your savings account, or wouldn't that be under your
Well,
paycheck?
so if you had more, so what the LGC requires and what GAP requires is that when you have open contracts and you flip the year, that you have to encumber, or it requires you to set aside fund balance for those open contracts.
Right.
So when we get down to your appropriable fund balance number and the fund balance that you can use for your 12.5% or your 12% policy level, That represents all of those commitments and the available cash after you fulfill those commitments. So the balance sheet is not a budgetary calculation except for the appropriable piece. The balance sheet represents the sum total of your liabilities and your assets.
Yeah, so I'll look at that D14 and maybe get with you
And
between
that would
now
be-
and Thursday, and then maybe we can have a larger conversation on that Thursday.
You absolutely can. To get D14, again, represents your budget. If you want to have that, and I can, we can sit down and look at your ACFR.
Yeah.
The ACFR is where you would see that information.
Very good. So
That
then-
translates into this slide.
Real quick on the other slide, you had up 19, the Budget Chronicles. I think it was question 1. So I appreciate the information on that slide. I think that may have been asked, but also asked was the breakdown of each percent. So we got a 4% proposed COLA and then a 1% 401K contribution. So if we break it down per percent, what's the dollar? Is it
We
just
have
under
that
$1 million?
later. That's later in the Chronicles.
Okay, very good, thanks.
So we took them, they're just numbered in order in which they came.
Gotcha.
So as we go through them, I'm sure we'll they're repetitive questions, and we try to consolidate as much as possible, but trying to honor the questions and being sure that we can answer those.
All right, Councilman Member Hare.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Yates, give me the full price. I see what the separated amounts are for the parking rates. I was wanting to know how much had we billed a revenue on that amount. I mean, I appreciate you put it in here, but I don't see what the total of what was received, whatever the amount was.
You're referring to the parking fund revenue?
Yeah, the parking violations. You know, I asked the well, right now I'm on number 11, but I asked the questions about parking and how much money that we were bringing in for parking and what the total of that was, and then where was that money being used. You give me, you give me about the events, you give me what the amounts are, but I did not see what the totals were, even if you don't have it now.
If you'll look on E21 in your budget document, the total
Oh, in
revenue.
my book, okay, go ahead.
In your book, the total revenue from revenues in the parking fund, operating revenue,
Yes, sir.
is about $548,000. That are 595 in this current, in the recommended. So it's page E21 at the top.
Now, and I got my book down, I won't, but look, I want to make sure I'm understanding. So you're saying the 548, that comes from what?
That is the parking revenue. So when folks
So
pay
like
for special
violations,
events.
tickets, okay, things what you
Yep,
just saying.
all of those different things.
Now, does that money go back into itself, or we use it? How?
It goes back to cover the parking fund. So it covers about a little less than half of the cost of the parking program.
Okay, now, and thank you for that. I see my question, number 15, concerning page 17, concerning the 8.9. The 8.9 employee savings, it says that it is used to go back into the general fund. Does that go back into the general fund from those one-time deductions that we take out? That's the reason it goes back in there? So outside of what you have behind I'm still on that, but all of those that go behind where you says the used vacancy funding is 8.9 million, okay, in your book, you say it goes back to the general fund. Is that from the one-time deductions that we take out to match something?
No, sir. Mayor, I can do it either way. We can go jump around, or I can go systematically through each question.
I
Well, that
keep
is-
trying to
I'm
get to
happy
that,
to
but-
answer the questions either way you want to do it.
we hadn't got there because we got
But that
catch
is
his
in
question because that's a relevant
Yep.
question. And council, we do need to get to your questions because all of them are your questions. But Jeff, I need you to get there because like we stop and we start
Well,
getting
that's
in
one of
detail,
my
which
questions
generate more
that's in
questions.
your
Yeah.
chronicles.
Absolutely. And the only question I posed to the mayor is, do you want me to start with one and go to 15, or do we just go to 15, which is fine. So the 8.9 million,
To 15.
when we use the 8.9 million, that covers current operations. So basically what we're saying is we're going to underspend our budget by 8.9 million on personnel. So that doesn't go to the fund balance unless unless at the end of the year we save more than 8.9 million, depending upon other expenditures and revenues, that may fall to fund balance. But we've already programmed in 8.9 million as a net reduction on the expenditure side, with the belief that we're gonna save that. So instead of saying, council, we need 3 more cents on the tax rate or 4 more cents on the tax rate.
Hold it right there. So that was what my question was the very first time I brought it up. If we've got a savings of 8.9, and I'm on, whatever this page, there's no numbers on these pages, but I'm on the first one that says recommended funding
Page 4 in the
strategy.
transmittal.
Okay, for council members. So when you say that we have a savings of 8.9 mil, you have 2 items, 2 bullets up under that's used. What about the 6.5 million? Where does that go? If you're taking out the 1.2.
Oh, the difference between the two?
Right, when you take out the 1.2 for the one-time expenses and to pay off some debts early, another 1.2, then what do you do with the rest of the money?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry that's not clear enough. So when they're not, it's not 8.9 less, is to balance the budget. We said our total expenditures are going to be, to do the recommended budget, we need to say $227 million.
Right,
First thing we're going to do is we're going to assume savings of vacancy money of 8.9. So that's 227 less 8.9. Then we said we're going to use $1.2 million for one-time items out of fund balance. So that's 227 less 8.9 less 1.2. Then we're going to pay debt off early. So it's 8.7 or 227 less 8.9 less 1.2 less 1.2 more for debt service. It's not that we have $8 million that we can allocate. The budget you have in front of you already allocates all of those items.
to include this 8.9.
Yes, sir.
Because there are things in it.
Yeah, I
that-
got it, because I was trying to
no,
see.
it's an important point to what
Yeah.
you're saying, right? Because the council is like we're chasing an outcome, right? Because it's saying that he's saying if these things are cutting, then it should be something left.
Right.
What you're saying is,
Right.
I've already put all of that in the budget, and we've already spent it out to its totality, and that's just to close the gap. That's to get you out of the red.
That's absolutely correct.
So
Yeah, I got it.
we've got to deal with the things that they got in there,
Yeah.
because you're trying to close a gap that the money's already gone if you get down to zero, is what he's saying if you took this recommendation.
Yeah.
And the only way to get more things in it is to add more taxes.
Yeah, and
So
all I was
so
simply-
that's why I'm saying you need that list of stuff
Yeah,
that
gotcha.
they've got in the basket that's being calculated.
'Cause I was thinking we had some extra to keep us
No,
from
and so
those 1, 2, 3
that's a
cents.
big piece that
Yeah.
he's trying to get us back to zero
Right.
based on that. Councilmember McMillan? Oh, okay. All right, Mr. Jeff.
All right, so
Go ahead, Mr.
let's
Jeff.
go back to question 2. Where in the North Carolina statutes is the required 5% employer contribution? This is the reference in the statute in the clip, so I don't think we need to go too far into that.
Does that include the LEOSA, or is that different? How does that relate to
That
LEOSA?
is, this is different.
Okay. Explain
So-
LEOSA versus this.
LEOSA is the separation allowance. When a police officer separates from the time that they are eligible for city insurance as an active employee to the time they're eligible for Social Security, the city makes up a portion of that cost for those employees. It used to be all employees, but the city chose to reduce its cost by changing that. But that's separate and above this. This is a statutory required contribution to a 401k program that
But the LEOSA stops whenever they start pulling
whenever
out
they
of their
reach
retirement.
whatever the age is,
Okay.
I can't remember the ages, is 60,
All right. Gotcha.
62. So it bridges them from their retirement age at 25 years to to the 62 eligibility number, and then that stops. This 401k is like all employees. The 401k
kick
is
in.
theirs from day one.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. So the dollars projected for sales tax ad valorem and expenditure changes. Sales tax is estimated to increase about 3.5 million. Ad valorem increase of about 4.8. To your question, I also believe, Mayor, we have touched those estimates up to as aggressive as we believe they can be. We're seeing slowing around the state as far as sales tax revenue, but that's where we believe that increase will be next year. And then there's a breakout down below of the expenditures as requested.
So even though you showed ad valorem and sales tax revenue up 14.5%.
That's from 22 to today.
I know. So what I'm saying is, what you're saying is you're anticipating it to be below this number?
No,
Like,
so
what does the last quarter say? That was what my question was. Is that captured in a separate question? Because you've got last quarter's information already.
we do, and it's actually slowing from what we would anticipate. So the growth that we are seeing in sales tax is about 6%. From the 26 budget to the 27 recommendation. So that's the $3.5 million number. What
All
you're
right.
looking at on that tax slide represents from 2022's actual to the 27 estimated budget, the growth in that encompasses across that. So if you were to just isolate sales tax from 26 budget to 27 budget, that number is about 6%.
Right. So on page 2 of his document under sales tax, 2022 was the last year before I think the county, well, maybe after that, 24, before they made their change. So this also reflects the county's change in the distribution, right?
Yes, sir.
So it doesn't necessarily, it's not going like from 64 million down to 55. That is the impact of them changing how they distributed the money.
That's correct. That's why I try to always show these together.
So are you
Because
saying
you've
that
gotta-
your
you've gotta put
decrease
them together.
amount is on the new formula, or you're basing it on total revenues? So in other words, once they went to ad valorem, we know we got less. So are you saying that amount is going to be less than, how did you get, it's still showing an increase
Yes, sir.
of 50, from 51 to 55.
That's the $3.5 million increase that we believe is there based on the economics and based on the trends we're seeing and the state Department of Revenue estimates and our colleagues around the state and what we're hearing. What, to your point, the redistribution change or the distribution change is no longer a factor in our estimates. So that's why I believe you have to show ad valorem and sales tax together for history purposes, because there was a play between increase in property taxes, decrease in sales taxes. So to say one went up and the other one went down necessarily across that spectrum
I'm just trying to
isn't
make sure
exactly
that
right.
the council sees, to make sure I'm understanding and we understand what
Absolutely.
you're saying.
So
It was
55
about
million.
6% growth between 22 and 23. That was old formula,
Correct.
right? From 59 to 63.
Right, but the growth wouldn't change.
I got that. I
Right.
got that. And I'm not talking about the formula right now. I'm just saying that there's about 6%. There's about 6% difference between 51 million and 55 million, right?
Yes, sir.
So how has it slowed? That's the same thing. That's the same pace.
Depending upon when you looked at it, for instance, you went from 59 to 63, then to 64 million. The growth in that, we were seeing growth at 7, 8, 9%, depending upon what it was.
Where is that at? That's not on here.
It's kind of masked by, it's masked by the change in allocation. So, but we were seeing higher growth than 6%. But you're growing 6% on a smaller part of your pie. And that's kind of what helped the city over time, because you had a bigger percentage of your budget was sales tax. Higher growth in sales tax gave you more resource. Now the higher growth is on a smaller part of our budget.
Right, but a more stable part, right?
Correct.
Because
Absolutely.
you
Ad
traded
valorem's
that in
much
for
more.
ad valorem and revaluation.
That's right. So as inflation hits and as the consumer changes their behavior, and that goes down, so that growth slows to 3% next year, what we would expect is that we won't see that dip in ad valorem. What we'll see is that sales tax number will trail off.
All right, keep going. Sir.
Okay? All right. So question 3, we covered that. Question 4, what's the number of annual events baked into the parking or included in the parking revenue? About 80 special events requiring special event fees in 25, which remember we're still in 26 now. That was about 77, and that fluctuates from year to year. How many events does Cool Springs host each year? 25 to 35 events in the downtown. And keeping in mind, Juneteenth and New Year's Eve are sponsored or paid for by the city, as well as separate from the Cool Springs downtown allocation. What is the comparison of annual operating, annual personnel expenditures by department for 25 and 26? So right there you can see the 25 expenditures for the departments, and then you have the personnel expenditures by department for 25 and 26. And please stop me if you have a question. Otherwise, I'll just keep moving on through. What is the breakout for the Parks and Rec district cost for FY27? So you can see for 27, the total budget for Parks and Recreation and maintenance is about 25.8 million, or 25.7 million. To your question, Councilman, it's about $1.5 million for right-of-way maintenance is included. And then you have Parks and Recreation is about 18.4, and then the district is about 5.7 million,
Question.
almost 5.8. Yes, sir.
Do we have on the Parks and Rec actual assets? So the actual Park and Rec facilities located in the city limits and the ones located in the district that Fayetteville Cumberland Parks and Rec operates and maintains. Do we have a per location breakdown?
I believe we do, because we have identified the district units that the district pays for separate from the city units. So would you, and I think that's actually.
I would love to talk about that more next Thursday. Yeah, I'd like to know and if you point me to a page in the budget book, that might be helpful. How many facilities or assets the city has, and then how many everybody else has?
And when you say assets, you're referring to facilities?
A facility. A splash pad, a neighborhood park, a swimming pool, a senior center, a special needs park.
Well, we can provide that breakout for you. I was looking to see if we had that specific breakout of the district facilities versus the city operated facilities, and I don't believe we do. So we can provide both of those for you.
Thank you.
All right.
Another question.
Councilman McMillan.
It just goes back to the question around parking. Has the city staff received any input from the communities, especially the Downtown Alliance, regarding our conversation at the last session on increasing parking fees?
I have not. Sheila, do you have any?
We did not engage with the downtown community regarding increasing the parking rates yet. We wanted to see what the council's special.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Jeff, you on page 14 yet?
What question is page 14?
All right, question 9.
I'm almost there.
All right.
How much was previously allocated for pavement markings in 26, and how much is left? We had $100,000 allocated. There's about $1,300 remaining for FY 26. And then the reallocation of existing, or the reallocation of CIP funding, there was about 1.2 million, a little less than that,
So that was my question.
of available funds.
So I want that block put up there. So council, what it is, there was closed out funds, 1.2 mil, that was coming back to the general fund, and it had already been spent before we got a chance to look at it. So 450 was the maker space, which we need to talk about that, what the end game is, return on investment for this year since we're belt tightening. New Century track improvement, I guess that's probably needs to come from Michael. It's a school property. They use it for sports in our joint parks and rec. Why are we carrying all the freight on track repair? The county owes us our money anyway from this parks and rec stuff.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Good morning.
I used
Mayor,
to saying good morning.
Mayor, when we annexed
Yeah.
the western part, the school system gave us the ability to provide and build the ball fields, the track, and the soccer fields in between New Century Middle School in the elementary school. So those are our assets. It's just on their land.
Who uses it? I know we do, but
And
do
the
they?
school.
And the school? Mm-hmm. The school is run by who?
The county.
Do they pay anything for our asset? I'm just asking.
They helped us. They helped us with Reed Ross.
Okay. So that's what I'm
Right.
saying. So is it typical that they participate?
Yes, sir.
So just 181, are they participating in that?
No, sir, not in that one.
Why not?
Because they participated in the Reed Ross one,
But you got two different tracks.
right? And
So
they're-
let's just put this whole block.
put
up
that
there.
on there. Put that on there.
Yeah.
But that's done. That project is done.
So then how is it done before we pass the budget to pay
No,
for it being done?
New Century is not done. Reed Ross is done. He's talking about the one
Yeah,
over
I'm talking
on
about
New
this,
Century.
the 450, 181 for that, 253,000 for concrete repair at various parks. Understand that? I don't know what general government means. What is that, Mr. Yates?
I can pull that specifically together if you'll give me.
So we're gonna run out. Y'all need another meeting after the next meeting because we got a lot of. Got to
No,
get
sir,
back.
I don't believe that
Okay.
we need
Well,
another
then we
meeting
got to
after
have
the
some
next
info
meeting.
to make a good decision.
But I
And
can
then
get
public
you-
safety, what was paid with that specifically?
We'll pull those together for you, and I'll have an answer in just a few
Thank you.
minutes. What was the methodology used for the fuel projection? We used the year-end projections in July through November of 2025 plus 27 projected fuel costs. We track gallons of usage across the organization and by vehicle. So we evaluate that, and we also work with our providers and spot pricing in the markets to figure out what the cost of gas is going to be. And we do it based on the estimated gallons of usage and to determine that. So that's how we projected our fuel projections. And as we're seeing right now, it's probably a little higher than what we had anticipated even with this budget, but we're going to continue to monitor that as we go on. So fuel's always an estimate. How much funding is allocated to City of Fayetteville sponsored outside special events? The outright or direct funding is $275,000. This is $165,000 for New Year's Eve, and then Juneteenth is about $110,000. There is additional in-kind contribution that will change next year based on pay rates, based on usage, based on anticipated crowds, and all those other things. But this is the direct funding that is provided for that. Where's the funding for the North Carolina History Center Civil War Museum? We funded about $6.6 million, and there was a general fund transfer of 6.3, and then you can see across the spectrum of the other funding sources. It's on your in your CIP book on page G35.
Question on that.
Yes, sir.
So the city and the county back then set aside $7.5 million over time. What is the total amount that we've paid? Because what you're saying is 6.3 of that is going to come at one time, even though we were setting it aside from the CIP or along the way. You're saying you're going to do a one-time disbursement all this year of the remaining 6.3?
I'd have to check and see how much we've dispersed. This is in appropriations to date, and they've had sufficient expenditures.
Because they've drawn some money, they've gotten some land that was counting toward it. I mean, there's
Yes,
a
sir.
history here.
So these, there's no new funding recommended for that project. This goes back to, looks like the CCAMs are in 2025, and to do that. So I'd have to check and see what the disbursement is. Tiffany, we'll have that for you in just a couple of minutes. Amanda and the team are looking that up real quick, and they can
Okay.
tell us how much we've dispersed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
So all has been dispersed. It's at zero. Then why is it showing up in our CIP still? Okay. Well, I need to know what the dust look like. Yeah. Dust vanishes, obviously.
So if we already sent them that money, why is it in this year's budget?
That's what I'm saying.
It's only in this year's budget because projects remain open until they are finally closed.
So that's the
It's an
dust.
appropriation to date, and probably when we sat down to talk about project closures, there was a little bit of money remaining, and we hadn't finished all of the distribution. So if the council wants to close the project and there's budget dust, as Michael said, then that can,
Dust disappears, the tracks, and
Well, one question we asked, and I don't know if it's on one of these Budget Chronicle questions, was closed out CIP projects for the year, which we ask every year when we do the budget. So then, I think last year we found 2.5 million or 1.5 million or whatever the number was, and then November there was another like 2.5 or 3 million, which could have saved us a penny in ad valorem tax rate increase. So what I don't want to happen is we find this on page 9. So we got 1.148 there that we found, and then in November, after the budget's been
We just found
passed,
some more
and-
dust.
then we find another 3.5 million.
that's right.
I'm not exactly sure the dollar values you're talking about, Councilman. But again, as part of the
is it
budget
in here?
balancing process, we take council's adopted CIP to reduce the tax rate impact as much as possible and continue on the projects. We recommend closing those projects and then reprogramming them to projects the council has already approved. If the council wants to have all that money come back to you for allocation ahead of the recommended budget, or as part of or separately from the recommended budget, then that's fine. That's just council just needs to communicate that to us. This funding is recommended on the question 9, going back to that slide. It's recommended as funding for you to adopt. It's a way to keep your tax rate as low as possible.
Right,
So-
and it's a kind of a philosophical question. What comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? So it's like when I questioned a few months back the recap of the strategic planning retreat, and I always harp on the strategic planning retreat and how it was reduced from 2 days to 1. Some of these conversations when it comes to mental health and different priorities we want to talk about, because I got some questions. We talked about corridors that I want to see in the budget, and now that we're at the budget time is not the ideal time to talk about. If we talked about those priorities in strategic planning, we could do that. But when I questioned the recap and kind of the summarization of the strategic planning and the wording of the one slide that said, is it council's priorities that are being put forward? Is that how staff organizes the priorities, or is staff taking what council's saying and making it fit within their priorities, right? So it's the same thing with the budget now. So you're giving us a budget that's baked, and you're saying we can completely do the same level of service with no tax rate increases. However, council has expressed interest in doing more in these things. So you could do a penny here and another penny here and another penny here and another penny here, or we just get the blank sheet and you let us build the budget, right? It's just two different philosophies. Like, are we doing what, because we're the voice of the people, so do we do what the residents, the taxpaying residents whose money we're talking about, are we moving their priorities forward, or are we moving staff's priorities forward? That's kind of the
So I want to
question.
clarify one
Or
thing.
councils. Councils is in the middle of that.
So one of the things that the budget's built around and shared every year is state law requires that the manager provide you with a balanced budget. The guiding documents that y'all give us are, of course, your strategic plan, your council member request, and when we say, and sometimes it feels like it's tongue-in-cheek, it's not, when I say, what do you want to do less of? And when we started and said, are you happy with the services that y'all are receiving? That was the question, Dr. Hare, that we started with before the meeting. Y'all have, other than a question about how we expand OCS, there's nothing that has, and I think there may be something on one or two programs here or there around public safety. Y'all have never, in the 20 years I've been working here with the city, have ever come back and said, we want to do something less of any service. It is, and that is because there is such pent-up demand that the residents talk to you guys about and ask about. And so, but the requirement that I give you all a balanced budget, and I would have loved to have had 3 days on the strategic planning retreat. One of those days got snowed out and we couldn't find enough time to make it up. But you're absolutely correct. That is where the nitty-gritty of talking about how you're going to expand transit. And the mayor and I had that conversation this week. Unless we get that option, sales tax option, we don't have the money to expand transit. And so those are the retreat is it. But to answer your question specifically about the council building the budget, y'all give us the information, the strategic planning, councilman request, citizen survey, your community watch meetings, and then as we put that together in a budget with the available resources that we have from sales tax, ad valorem, and other sources that we identify, and we give it to y'all as a recommendation. And now y'all are telling us where we hit and where we missed.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hewitt.
And I have an answer, Mayor, on your questions.
Okay, yes, sir.
There is no money remaining that's not committed in the Civil War History Museum, so that has all been committed via contract.
And dispersed.
There's about $29,000 that has not been dispersed. We're probably waiting on reimbursement requests because we do a reimbursement basis. They provide us receipts. We reimburse them for that through a pay app.
Okay.
The funding in the CIP, the reallocation was used for building replacement, facilities, inventory, and replacement, as the CIP committees talked about. The building maintenance too, which is our ongoing building maintenance, and a portal for emergency medical services in the fire department so that we can improve our response with the fire and have them have a direct link with EMS. So those are the projects. Not all of that funding was used to fully fund those projects, bits and pieces, because those projects are more than what was available here. But that's how we reallocated. If council so choose, Councilman Hondros, we would hope that our priorities are council priorities. But if your priorities are different than what we've laid out in the recommended budget, you absolutely can tell us that you don't want to do the makerspace. You want to change the makerspace.
Well, we got that whole block up there.
Yep.
So we'll
So
catch that
I
next
just want to
time.
clarify that there's not three parties in this equation. It's only one. We try to take and meet your objectives and your priorities as they've been laid out.
All right. Thank you, sir.
So
Did have a point since Councilman Hondros brought up the priorities and how we get there, right? You said this a couple of times at the meeting the other day. You showed us an example when you gave the public hearing for the budget, and you said, look at this. I don't know if you've got those pages up there, do you?
it depends on which
All right.
slide
You
you're
said,
referring
look
to.
at this. This shows how our community prioritize it because this is where they put their money. You remember?
Yep.
All right. Now, third from the bottom on that list that you showed was economic development. Okay. As I look at D5, although economic development was number 2 on our strategic priority from the strategic planning, economic and strategic growth, enhance economic growth opportunities throughout the city. So looking at D15, where we got a summary of expenditures, there is a negative amount for economic development, and it's third from the bottom. Even though it was number 2, it's decreased. There's no funding in here for anything new, according to this sheet here. There's a net reduction of 286. Public safety is police 2.5. That's consistent with that. Also, community safety is 2.1. That's all public safety. So that's 4 point something million net. Fire is 2.1, so that's 6. So that does show that there's interest there. Housing was expand housing and neighborhood revitalization. I don't see that on here at all. The down payment assistance program got tapped out because it was being used. How much is set aside for that? And you don't have to have all answers today, but I need it on that board because this is not consistent with.
No, sure, and I can answer that question because I have. We know the answer. So for down payment assistance program, you're right. The recommendation or the program is tapped out from general fund. What we're looking at is, and what Chris Colley presented to you as a council, is how to use the housing bonds. So based on what we believe is consensus from council, as part of your CIP adoption, as part of your adoption, we will implement the $12 million housing bond program as laid out by Chris Colley, which includes all of those programming for the housing. You're not going to see that in the operating budget schedule that you're talking about, and you wouldn't see it specifically. You would see it broken out in the
Does that
departmental
cover
level.
funding down payment assistance?
It does cover some funding for down payment assistance.
How
yes.
much? That's what we need to be able to articulate. Okay, so that reloads that fund based on the housing bond?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
all right, gotcha.
So, and keep in mind, economic and community development funded through the operating budget primarily focuses on our CDBG and our housing programs and those things. This is not like Robo's programs where he goes out and does his piece. That contract's funded through Chris's budget, but there are a variety of factors, and we don't disagree with you in council's priorities. Remember, this budget is just to continue the services you have. If you wanted to expand the
But
discussion into economic
That's not all the way
development,
true, Jeff, because it got stuff in there that we didn't continue. You know what I mean? Like we just showed that list of 1.1, that wasn't a continuation of anything.
these, the makerspace is a continuation because the council
It
had
didn't,
told
it
us they
didn't have
wanted to
any
do it.
funding there.
It
So,
did-
so it wasn't anything there last year, right?
No, sir, the council adopted,
Yeah, I got that, but it's really not a continuation of service. Continuation of service means you're going to have the same amount of trash pickups,
well,
streets
this
being
is
paved.
capital, you are correct. This is
Yeah.
one-time funding. So this is kind of gets where we're blending the two. But in this case, to continue maintaining your parks, for instance, in concrete replacement and repairs, what council has told us is that we want to take care of infrastructure, expand parks, and expand recreation opportunity and be sure that we're providing that. This is to maintain the system you have under the projects that council has approved and the direction council's given
got-
us. So if,
I'm
absolutely, Mayor, if you
I'm-
wanted to take that 1.2 and go somewhere else with
Well,
it,
we got it up there, so we'll council figure that out. The other appropriations that Councilmember Hare, it's a reduction of 5.5 mil. What was that?
I believe we have a slide on the other appropriations coming up. So
Okay.
if you'll give me a chance to
Yes,
get
sir.
to that. The budget to actual comparisons for the Office of Community Safety. You can see the 25 budget was 2.3 million. The biggest chunk of that was into contractual services. The actual was 194,000, and we rolled over about 63,000 of that. The remainder of that went to fund balance and was used for other one-time items. And then there's the breakout of the OCS budget with 27 actuals through the pool of this information. How much revenue generated per hour from parking? So this tells you that, keeping in mind all the zeros, we're not charging for parking. I am on question 14.
I got a question on 13.
Okay, go for it.
So we budgeted last year at this time, 2.3 million for OCS,
Yes, sir.
and we spent 194,000.
In 25, that is correct.
That's what I was saying before with the mental health. You encumbered $2 million.
So where'd that $2,042,000 go?
It became part of your fund balance. So that 100 and the
So
the 102 million.
Right. So just like the slide 27 with question 9 that the mayor was just referencing with the makerspace and all that, those proposed projects that were like the 1.150 and this 2 million. So we're encumbering money, we're budgeting money for certain things, and then when it doesn't get used to those things, it gets put back in the soup and staff allocates it and spends it where they deem appropriate instead of,
No, sir. That is incorrect.
so where'd the
that
$2 million go?
That is absolutely
So where's the
incorrect.
$2,042,000?
No, sir. The only way that a fund balance can be expended is through appropriation. When we come back to council and we say we're going to use fund balance to pay for that item, Stadium View is a perfect example. When we were asked how would we fund the Stadium View development project, we said we would use fund balance. Council took an action, appropriated an action in open session. That is the appropriation of the accumulation of all of those dollars. The reallocation in the CIP is a recommendation. If council determines it doesn't want to do the 1.2 million reallocation, that is council's decision. It's our job to give you the recommendation. To suggest that we do something
Jeff-
other than what's legally allowed is
And
incorrect.
let me jump on this one too real quickly. I think that the difference here is looking at the makerspace, that was one-time funding, and with the money that you're looking at Q13 was operating. So this was envisioned to be an ongoing effort. And so if the $2 million, the amount of money that Jeff said would roll back into fund balance, That could be considered as a one-time if you weren't going to continue OCS, but you are going to continue OCS. And so you've got CIP one time, and then you've got operating. And you recall that we were at, I think, this budget balancing session last year, and there was a request to balance the budget to get the votes that someone said put more money to OCS, even though we didn't have a plan to spend it all. And so it was, that was where the council at the end was gathering the votes for the, of how to spend the money. So this operation money that is unspent in OCS's budget this year, other than the contract services, which again, it still was part of their operating budget per se, unless you want us to do something different with OCS next year, then it would have stayed in fund balance. Well, it'll stay in fund balance. But this is my right, your left, my center. I have a hard time.
Right, and I'm not suggesting, I appreciate that additional context, Dr. Hewitt. I'm not suggesting that staff doesn't come back to us with those appropriations. We do a lot in consent, we do a lot in different, whether it's closed session, open session. But when we're trying to bake the budget, right, so and it's an impossible ask, right? So the residents are demanding all the services, more services, and the exact same tax rate or less, right? And it's hard. Well, we do that in our personal budgets too. It's like, hey, I only have X amount of dollars to eat for myself and my family this month. So we might like to eat steak 3 times a week. Well, it doesn't fit in our budget this year because we're paying more for gas because we were doing our annual budget based on the $3 a gallon we were paying for gas last year, but this year I'm paying $5 a gallon for gas. So what I'm doing, I'm either eating chicken more or pork, or I'm going to a wholesale club and buying a large thing of steaks and breaking it down where I can save some money. So that is hard, but that's what the residents are expecting of staff and of council, is that we want the level of service, we want additional increases in mental health, OCS, and these things, and we want the tax rate the same. And we're trying to do it the easy way, which is just, hey, we can do it all, we just have to raise taxes. But they don't want to raise taxes because they're hurting. They're paying, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul to pay their monthly bills, and they don't necessarily want to pay another $60 or $68 or $100 in ad valorem taxes to the city of Fayetteville.
Got it. Absolutely. And so I guess the question would be, when money moves back, right? Not saying that nothing nefarious has happened, process-wise. When money moves back, before it is reassigned to other things or recommended that it be reassigned, because we understand it's not final until we take some action, because this is what Hope Mills is in the paper for, right? That some of what, that there were some mid-year transactions that were made that included certain things in budget amendments and so things. So the question is, and I guess where he was going was, if there was an overage of last year's funded amount and the money moved back into fund balance, when did that happen, and what did council take the action to say, we're going to close out OCS, the everything over and above what was spent, and we're going to put it back into fund balance? If so, did that happen, and when?
So the way the process works, and this is where budget and the accounting year come into play, right?
Yeah.
A budget ordinance, the difference between a capital ordinance and a budget ordinance expires on June 30. At the end of the day, on June 30 at midnight, you can no longer use that budget.
Right.
That budget, all that authorization is gone. Okay? So when it comes to OCS, and I'll use OCS as an example, the $2.3 million on June 30, 2025, whatever was left in that budget expired. It is no longer appropriated. Mm-hmm. So it goes back in as Tiffany and the team in finance do the financial statements. They take the sum total of expenditures and the sum total of revenues and put your financial statement together. When we come back with the auditor, typically in November, and we lay out for council, here are the changes in fund balance in your balance sheet. At that point, that is when council becomes aware and is made aware, and the public is made aware through your financial statements, the fund balances, okay? The cumulative impact of all those over and unders. Now, for it to be spent, okay, what has to occur is council then has to take an action And they take those actions through a couple of different ways. They can come as a single budgetary item to council as a budgetary amendment, which you see sometimes on your capital program, or in the consent agenda or not. Sometimes it gets pulled, sometimes it doesn't, or comes to you through the budget. So we try to, as we are doing today, and as we've done all along, is say, here's your fund balance usage number. We believe that you're going to have $1.2 million.
I got you, Jeff. Don't
those
take me too
things.
far.
No, I'm just, but Mayor, I want to be sure that everybody in the public understands that we use that fund balance tool in accordance with your policy to help keep that tax rate low out of the gate.
I understand, but somewhere between doing it the way you just said and getting to council's objective, you're the professionals to do it to where it's legal and it's within the policy. So we got that.
Yes, sir.
So my question was, and I didn't want to go all around to answer the question. The question was, when was that done? Now, what I'm seeing here, because you just talked about June 30th of 2025 it expired, so July 1st of 2025 the new year started, which
Yes,
is
sir.
this the column to the right. So under contract services for the column to the right, out of $1.72 million that's been set aside for the contract services, $368,000 has been spent.
Correct.
And there's approximately $1.3 million remaining that hasn't been spent. And we're almost doing another budget, correct? We're in the process
correct.
now of doing the budget, which in June 30, this will expire again. So 30 days from now or better, 32 days, it will expire. Do you anticipate $1.3 million in contracts that's remaining there now to be spent in 32 days?
Some of that will be encumbered because we have, I know that they have allocated to safe space
How much?
activations and grants. I'd have to pull that number for you. The other thing is we have a budgetary amendment coming. If you remember, council approved in a work session for us to redo Blue Street Center for an OCS office. We are bringing, and that was to be done out of the remainder unspent money in OCS.
And see, and that's
so
why-
we've got a
that's why-
budgetary
right.
action coming to move that money to the capital project now that we're close enough to the end of the year to be able to say,
So we need the difference in all of that. And that is kind of the genesis of that we've got to be able to follow that because we got to explain it, right? When it doesn't work right, we got to be able to explain that. So
I'm not sure I understand
that,
what you're
that
asking.
there's 1.3 remaining.
Yes, sir.
You know that you're going to set aside some of that for Blue Street. You know that because y'all have talked about it. We haven't taken official action, but you know that. So that's knowledge that you have. So I'm just saying as for us, if there's money left over from any of these things, we just need to follow whether it goes back into the general fund pot. We understand you can't spend it unless we do another action. But the genesis of the question was when it goes back in, it appears that there's already an earmark for it to go back out. Even though council said they're going to do it, you just identify, hey, we're going to have extra money over here and it can be used over here.
Yes, Mayor.
Is that fair?
In part, and I think I understand exactly where you're going. That's one of the reasons that at your request, we brought you guys back the plan for Blue Street because it was our goal to spend a portion of this money to give them a space to work from, to add the mental health teams, for them to be able to do the homeless coordination and other activities. And so
I guess what I'm saying, I'm not talking about the philosophy behind it. I'm asking, this is a numbers meeting.
Yes.
So if you brought us a plan for Blue Street, then you got a number that it takes to do that. That's what I'm asking for, and you're saying you got to get back with me.
We brought that back to council. That
Okay,
number
so
is
then you know what that number is.
850,000. The
How much?
number was 850,000. But when we brought back the plan for Blue Street to council and laid out kind of how we were going to do it and everything, we said to council at that time and got consensus that we were going to fund it with unused funds from OCS in 2026. We laid out the funding strategy as well as the plan.
I'm tracking,
And that's
but because it's not here and it's not indicated anywhere that so to us you don't have 1.3 left over. You got 1.3 minus.
And Mayor,
Blue
to be
Street,
clear,
right?
this is a question that y'all asked us. So this is just a
Right.
snapshot. The specific question was, what are the FY 25 and 26 budget to actual comparisons? And that's what this is. But the questions that it's generating, we can get answers to those. We have answers to those. But the only reason this looks paused is because this was the specific question that was asked. But clearly, we know how much it's going to take. we believe, for Blue Street. And you're right, it's 1.3 is the variance, but there's already a request, I think, or will be, I think, about adding back funding for more mental health teams. And so,
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like that is making decisions before we get a chance to make it, right? Like
not us, this
No,
is
guidance,
going to come from y'all.
Well,
not-
right. It's going to come from us, but it's coming in as a part of this, as a recommended action to do two teams versus one team. So I'm almost finished, Councilman McMillan. But what I'm getting at is that there is a total of 1.859 of variance that's got to be spent before in 32 days, right? Is that a fair statement?
It is under this table, that is
minus
correct.
what's anticipated that's not shown.
It would be minus what's encumbered.
That's it.
So this is probably a pull through March. Do you remember? Through April. So you still have the remainder
we're
of
in
May,
May, right.
and you have June. Plus you have the contracts of all the grants that have just been awarded for safe space activations. So the question was about, to the manager's point, this is just a mid-year budget to actual comparison. So once we play the year out, once we finish the year, then we'll know about that 1.8. And
That's,
we'll
that's
have a budget
information
action.
that we would need to know before saying how much you need for next year. You see what I'm saying? Like if this was the federal government, what you don't spend is your base starting amount. You remember Jim Arp used to go through these exercises every year. But the question is, can we get this information in a prior to the next meeting? I don't want to belabor it
sure.
because you got other questions.
Jeff may know, but I'm not sure what it is. If you take a look at OCS's budget in your book, that is how we propose to move forward. And if there is anything in that OCS page in your book that y'all don't wish to do, this is just a funding source. This is just what the money was there. But if you look at, and what we have in OCS, you have 4 pillars. You have the pillars of the mental health, you've got the youth, you've got the violence reduction, and it was one other, it's homelessness. I think it was homelessness. And so the budget in your book, and I'm not sure what page that is, which analyst can say, describes what that looks like. But to your question, I think as well, and if I get this wrong, budget team, let me know. Our goal is not to spend the $1.85 million or whatever's left of that before June 30. Our goal is to expense something for a service. And so what we're, at the end of this, it's no different, which is also one of the reasons that I was hesitant to put too much in OCS's budget for next year for mental health teams, is because John's goal is to spend every dollar and expense everything that you give him. But even with, despite his best efforts and ours, he could not go through all of that as well. And so, and you don't want us to just to go and just try to be spendy, and you want us to make an impact.
Right, and I'm saying why this is relevant is if you're counting money that the council's looking for, how that we can keep this from becoming an extra burden on the taxpayer. So if there's half of the 1.859 left over, that's good information to have before you say, let's just do 2 crews versus 1 crew. Or, using it for an example, right? We need to build Blue Street out and fill every office up. But that has not come to the body to say, not saying you don't support whatever the effort is, but you don't have a base amount that you can use as a good estimate. And we don't know what we have remaining.
So a couple of things. H24 in your budget document is the Office of Community Safety budget, and then it's part of the manager's office. But to your point, Mayor, the way that municipal budgets are built, and because they're one-year budgets, we don't make the assumption that there is a rolling amount of money from one year to the next for operations. Okay, that'd be tantamount to using your savings account for operations. So the way that we build the budget is we ask the directors, what is the cost of the service you're going to provide in the following year? If there is, let's say it's $900,000, as you pointed out. If it's $900,000, then that'll come back as fund balance through the ACFR process, and then council will take action to appropriate that. We don't say, okay, because John, you had 900 left in 25 and 26, we're going to reduce next year's allocation by 900, and you can just use what you had the year before.
I get that.
As of on June 30, that slate gets completely cleared, and that he is no longer legally allowed to spend that except for where we have encumbered
But when the money
contracts.
comes back, the dollar amount that's remaining, the council, it should be pointed out if it's a significant amount. So that could be a policy amount. That could be a policy.
Well, and that's your
thing.
12. That's the 12. So
Right.
when we looked at the fund balance analysis and we said you have about $1 million more based on what's in the budget.
So you mean to tell
is
me that you
leftover
are, so then
amount.
that means that for you to come to that conclusion, you already know what the number I'm asking for is.
We have an estimate.
Well, then can you provide it? That's what I've been asking for.
Mr.
for
Mayor,
10
if
years.
I
We
will.
did in the fund balance
If I
slide.
can.
That was because it's the aggregate
All right.
over under of all revenues and expenditures. You can't take one department in isolation and say John's going to underspend 900,000 because if we look at PD, they may overspend their overtime budget by 900,000. It's the aggregate total of revenues and expenditures. We may be under our revenues by 900,000. So until we close the books, we don't know what that exact number is.
Councilman McMillan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add some context to this and then try to move us along in the conversation. We need to remember that last year at this time, we didn't have John fully in the seat as the director. Remember that he has a plan now that includes expansion that is sound, that we all need to support. If public safety, this comprehensive approach to public safety, if it was an apple right now, we're talking about a seed. With all the respect to Chief's work and the police department, OCS budget, which we've just spent 15 minutes scrutinizing, is about 2% of the whole comprehensive public safety budget. And that context is worth remembering as we scrutinize this solid start to a good program. Also, just want to note that we're about halfway through a long slide deck. Would love to get to some more points. I think we've interrupted Jeff way too much. I'd ask, if we ask him a question, allow him to answer that question without interrupting him, and show the same respect to all of the
Councilman,
staff.
we got one chair in the meeting. That's me. So we'll
Maybe-
move it along.
maybe the chair
I
should
appreciate
take note of that
All right.
comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff.
All right. The next question we had is what's the hours of generated parking? Keep in mind, you can't really prove a negative necessarily. So to say what the hours that we don't collect would be would just be a guess or an estimate. But this is what the parking revenue from 2023 was by hour. The 8.9 million. This is to your question, Dr. Hare. We take that back again. Reiterate. We take the 8.9 million in this case, and it is offsetting expenditures that are appropriated. It's not an addition to or a savings that's unallocated. It's part of the budget, and because the city has done that, probably before you were here, it's been a balancing tool. If we were to change that, and a lot of cities, not all cities do a vacancy savings number, then that would translate into every year that 8.9 million would either fall to fund balance or be available for council's use. But you would have to call all stop and you would have to fund that 8.9 million otherwise. So it's a savings tool, a perfectly legitimate savings tool, but that's how that's used. And the way we estimate that, and I think this was to your question, Mayor, that you had asked and you weren't here last time when I went over this, it's not based on positions because there's a difference between vacancy savings and vacancy rate. The vacancy rate is the number of slots that are vacant. The vacancy savings is the total savings we get, difference between budget and payroll. Vacancies are not all created equal. So if a trash truck driver or a transit driver at $21 is not the same as an ACM. So when we look at the salary savings, we take the total salary, our total budget for salary, and divide it by 26 because there's 26 payrolls a year. Then every payroll we have a total. So for instance, in July, there were 2 payrolls in July of 2025. That payroll was 8.8 million, almost 8.9 million. Then we know we saved actually based on our budget, we saved about just under $2 million. That's how we estimate the savings of 8.9 as we go back and we say, well, right now through April, we've achieved 9.8 million of our vacancy estimate for 2026. So we go in and we say, okay, based on that and the prior year history, you can see it's tightening up. We believe 8.9 is reasonable. Again, if what I pointed out is if the chief gets down to 9 vacants, then some of that savings is going to be eaten away, because historically this number was set when we had 100 vacants in PD. So that is kind of how we achieve, or how we determine what the 8.9 number is. It's not based on vacancy rate, it's based on vacancy savings. So I'll be happy to answer any questions on that, but I just wanted to clarify that since you, Mayor, since you had asked that question specifically.
Gotcha.
Parking violations, I believe Councilman Hare, this was one of your questions. All that goes into the parking fund to offset cost within the parking fund. The vacancy, this is a continuation of that same question. Like I said, there's some repetitiveness to some of these, so they're not all going to require, Councilman Millen, extended conversation, because some of them we've answered previously. Vacancy savings are used to offset operational costs. They literally are a negative number in other appropriations that reduces the total budget. We do that so we don't understate operations across the organization. So when you see PD, that's the full cost, not an assumed vacancy within PD, but we do that as a fund level. What is the $187,000 for the Campbell Soup incentive? There was an agreement put into place. Basically, it's based on jobs. It's just an economic incentives agreement. We have the history of that. We can provide you the documentation. It was in the agenda at the time. Just like any of those other agreements that come back to council that we talk about with Robo and so forth. The 27 is the last year of that incentive agreement, and we have to budget it every year because we have to pay it back. It's a grant. Okay. How much money is available in lieu of sidewalks? There's about, in the lieu of sidewalks account, there's about $133,000 still there. What are the police department personnel budgets and officer step plan? And I think Councilman Hondros, this goes to your question about where we had those increases and where did the increases go. And I did a little research to refresh my memory on that in those years. So first of all, you can see the pay officer step plan in 2022 was 41.5 for step 0. We took that in 2025 all the way to 50,555. So that was a big jump. The money that when we did that, there were several ways we funded that. Okay, so that cost for the move was about $5.6 million. Okay. We funded that by first taking out, because we had enough vehicles in reserve, we took out about $2 million of funding for police vehicles. We said, okay, Chief Braden at the time, we know that you've purchased these vehicles, you haven't filled the positions, but we were continuing buying, so we had about 75 to 80 vehicles in reserve or waiting for drivers. So that brought that number down to about $3.8 million. The fire piece of that was about $2.5 million for the adjustments made in fire at the time. So that's where that 4 cents, how that was divvied up. And remember, the 4 cents at that time was only worth about $1.5 million per penny. So, and if you go back and you were to look at the personnel expenditures, which are on the left side of this slide, you can see the jumps in police, for instance, that value being about $3 million, going from 24 to 25. And then there's, in addition to that, we adjusted the pay ranges to be a year per step and so forth going out. So the funding stayed with PD, and you can follow that funding across their total budget as we saw on the slide earlier. So I just wanted to, that was a question that we had, and we wanted to be sure we answered that. What are the debt payments scheduled for 2027? Yes, sir.
On the FD, I appreciate that breakdown. That helps a lot. But also, I was looking at page, I think it's G42 in this book. My little Post-it note fell out. But we got a $2.5 million increase, if I'm reading it right, in the total FPD budget. But the operating expenditures was actually cut by $676,000. Also cut of the FPD budget was $92,000 in contract services, and we also cut about $266,000 from supply. So I pulled out my old books, and I think 2023, for example, supply was 625,000. So we're expecting them to, FPD to operate fully functional, same level of service in 2027 with 210K for supply?
So that's a very good question and a very good point. The one penny that we've recommended for operations makes up that difference.
Right.
So you are correct. With no tax rate increase, and we put that to the police chief and his team to give us where they would have to reduce. Or
So is
would-
that fully honest and transparent to say that it's the same level of service when it's not? It's just not. We could spin it however we want to, but it's just not.
if that's how you would like to see it? Absolutely.
Because we could have put other stuff for that penny, and we could have baked this into the original proposal, and we didn't. And so we're going to, if council chooses to, raise taxes again in the name of public safety when it doesn't have to be that way. We just quit cutting their funding for Office of Community Safety, for fire and police, and just give them the tools they need to carry out their mission to the level of service that the taxpaying residents demand and deserve.
And if you absolutely, Councilman, if you would like to fully restore that and not have the tax rate increase and take that out of Parks and Recreation or another department, that's a choice that the council can make. This is our best recommendation based on what we believe is necessary to operate the city next year.
All right. So this is why, council, I was saying, let's put things we want to add or things we want to possibly discuss taking off to keep us moving. Because what happens is this now gets into the philosophy of what and how well and what level of service the city will provide. But it's all based on the money that they have to do it. And so, rather than us spending time, Councilman Mahondros is there, part of that, definitely have an issue if there is a $600,000 reduction in supplies or cost. What was that area at?
So if my math is right, and if I'm reading page G42 correctly, the overall FPD budget increased $2.5 million, which makes sense based on the salary increases and those things. But operating expenses was cut $676K. I'm not sure exactly what all goes into operating expenses. Contract services was cut $92,000. And supply was cut an additional $266. It was cut, I think, another couple $100,000 last year. So now the total supply budget is $210K when it was like $625 in 2023.
So we'll just notate it, but I guess as we get into that, I guess that may be I hope, Mr. Hewitt, you'll give opportunity for the departments to kind of weigh in when we get to that. But you can just notate that because we're not going to work through that today.
Yeah, and I also have a question mostly on fire, but also PD as far as like cooperation agreement. I think they got cooperating agreements with for response, like outside of the city limits with volunteer fire and those things. I'd like to look at maybe next Thursday what it actually cost us and how we're getting reimbursed, and what if any expenses the outside services, partner services expend in the city of Fayetteville.
All right. Well, that's a lot to write down, but we'll just notate the PD operations is an area we want to talk about. Councilman McMillan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to also make the suggestion that we turn to the city manager, to whom those departments report in terms of an assessment of the services and degradation, and trust that. Also think we could question and grapple with the budget without making claims in terms of anybody's integrity or any of the staff's integrity. I think we could create an environment and maintain an environment of respect in here.
It starts with us, guys. So let's remember how we set the tone. So, but thank you. All right, Mr. Yates.
Yes, sir. We had the question, what are the debt payments scheduled for 2027? So this is about $12.2 million. And keeping in mind the Parks and Recreation GO bonds.
Which page are you on?
I'm on Q21. So,
okay. Yep.
Just point out a couple of things for you. Stormwater, of course, is enterprise. The stadium parking, The fire, that comes out of the general fund, but the others come out of either the dedicated tax rate for capital or the dedicated tax rates for the GO bonds. The transportation GO bonds, the 25 million, which is almost fully expended, that comes actually from mostly from the licensing fee. And that actually should say transportation and public safety. So a smaller portion of that, I believe, if I remember right, about 15 million is of the original debt issuance. So a portion of that is for the public safety bond, GO bond from 2022. But that comes from a combination of tax rate and the licensing fees, motor vehicle licensing fees. If you remember, we did $20 to help fund street improvements through the GO bond a few years ago. What is downtown hospitality officer and how much does overtime cost? A sworn police officer dedicated to patrolling the downtown district. It came in 2025 with $100,000. This year, we've spent about $1,000. That is what's been directly attributed to the hospitality officer. A lot of that just gets paid through overtime and assignment from the PD, so we don't necessarily break it out exactly like that because the chief sends patrols and looks for folks to cover that using overtime. And if we need additional response to that or additional, that will require us a little more time to dig into. But that's the history on that and kind of what it is.
Quick question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
So this year, $1,000. I thought that number changed from last time for the overtime. What was that exact amount for the overtime?
That is, we would have to do some more digging and working with PD to get it because it's not exactly. To get that number, they have to have coded the overtime, and sometimes we don't always code the overtime that we use downtown for that hospitality officer. If that's something the council is interested in and tracking a little more closely, we can absolutely make it a focus of tracking it. It's just something at this point.
I just want to know for the Cool Springs.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Chief and Jeff, I think we also approved a 3-month trial for overtime. That was 60,000. So that was, which was additional officers as well, that to add more color to that. That was a separate ask for more dedicated officers at times. And that was, I think, a 3-month trial that we ran.
Okay. What's the difference between the officer and the ambassador? The ambassador includes general upkeep, debris, litter pickup, that kind of thing, cleaning up, and daily services, providing information and so forth. And then, of course, the police provide the criminal activity enforcement and those kinds of things downtown. So that's kind of the difference between those two. What are the in-kind costs for Juneteenth and New Year's Eve celebration? This is what I was alluding to earlier. The estimated in-kind for 2025 events was about $17,000 for Juneteenth and about just under $29,000 for the New Year's Eve. The improvements for Jasper Street. The improvements for Jasper Street are not specifically set out, but there's been underlying improvements done by PwC in that area. And I won't go through all of this, and then Byron can come up and explain in more detail. But at this time, the POW bill can be used for funding and striping and resurfacing, but there's no approved funding for that, for the construction of the proposed intersection improvements and so forth. Did I leave anything out, Byron? Is there anything I need to add to that? Okay. Additional funding for the intersection or for Jasper Street in total? Okay. So the question was, during the budget preparation process, has each department reviewed and submitted what their budgets would look like with no tax increase? The answer is yes. The budget as provided to you included that, and the differences are listed out separately in the presentation today. That would outline where that additional penny goes specifically for current operations. And to your point, Mayor, when we talk to the departments, or Councilman Hondros, the departments, the only instruction departments are given is that at the time when we do the budget, we don't ask them to cut personnel. We hold personnel as kind of being as required. But beyond that, the departments have the ability to request what they believe the cost of their operations are going to be. So, and to prioritize those. So when we talk to the police department, for instance, on the supplies budget, the police department prioritized the reductions in those areas over other areas within their budget. So it's not necessarily a reduction of supplies, it's a reallocation within their budget, knowing that we have limited resources. And they had identified if they have to, if they have to achieve a 0% tax increase, those items that are listed in that 1 penny list are where they would offer up as a way to get to that reduction. I believe it was Councilman Jones asked, what does a 0.5% look like across the board? When we go to departments and we say, okay, our budgets, our revenue estimate is X, how do we fit? The summation of those items are what you're seeing in that half penny, or that 1 penny add back. So to say, you're correct, Councilman Hondros, to say that there will be some impact to service. It's not necessarily a degradation of service, but it is a dollar-to-dollar, budget-to-budget reduction. They may or may not have spent it in that way, but every department wrestles with, as these costs grow and we try to contain those costs, we have to look at where we can make reductions. And because fire and PD and community safety represent over half your budget, for them to, the $76 million to include, $1 million of budget to budget reduction, not actual to budget reduction, but budget to budget reduction, is not necessarily a cut. It's just a reduction of what they're available to spend. We are going to provide police enforcement and services at the current levels that we're just going to have to nip and tuck and pinch to get there. So I just wanted to, this question, when I got to this question, I just wanted to explain kind of that, a little bit of that process, because we do believe at a 0 cent tax increase, you can maintain the current services with accepting
Cuts.
that you wouldn't be able to do some of those things.
All right. I have a question. Thank you for
Yes, sir.
clearing that up. So I brought my CIP book.
Absolutely.
So the K1 on the CIP book has recommended project closures. A lot of these are in various, some enterprise funds. That's on K1. So I guess these are to close it out, but it shows money left over, like from downtown Hurley Plaza's $380,000. So where has this money been spent? This is more than the 1.2, so I know it's not calculated in there. How have we factored in for this, and when did you expect council to make these recommended closures? Because Hurley Plaza's finished, that's 380. Cape River Trail Connector's 185. Not sure if that was grant funded or general funds. Mobile radio software is 83,000. It goes on and on. So it's on K1 of the.
Yes, sir. I'm just looking at it. So, for instance, in the 31, that's in Fund 31, which is the bond funding. So that funding.
Which one?
The Hurley Plaza downtown play space, since that was the one you asked about.
So that was Parks and we funded that after the bond was passed.
That it is. That's
the
where
stadium came in 18, the bond was in 16.
Correct.
So that's not out of that.
Well, you have open projects that are still in your bond fund, of which, and I can't speak to how, it was there before I came, so I'd have to do some research to.
Yeah, the bond was in 16. It had a list of things. Hurley Plaza wasn't one of them.
But in Fund 31,
Okay.
which is the bond funds,
Okay.
everything in that fund, we make the assumption that it is tied to that bond. So the funds in that bond fund need to stay with the projects in that bond fund. All CIP money is not
Jeff,
fungible.
I'll do respect. I understand completely. I was here. But the bond was not, Hurley Plaza was not a part of the Parks and Rec bond.
I'd have to defer to Mr. Gibson because he was.
We did that after the stadium came in. So that was not one of the 7, 8 projects that we told them. We told them we'd build 2 senior centers. We told them we'd build the park upgrades. We told them we'd build Gilmore and Seabrook and a couple of the others. But Hurley Plaza was not a part of that because we actually pulled a Hurley Plaza committee together, and Art led it for a minute with the Hurley family. And they raised some private funds. So talk to me, Mike.
There was a splash pad.
Okay.
That was supposed to be funded over at the baseball stadium. It was part of the playground unit that's in the back. And there was supposed to be a water feature out front. Okay. So the council at the time took, I think it was either $450,000 or $480,000. The reason we couldn't put it in was because of the sewer main coming out of the front of the building.
Right.
So that's where that money came from. We just never were able to finish it until just the pass, and then the Hurley Plaza came in, so all of that funding was used to finish it out. Because then the council changed and said they wanted the bollards so that people, when that accident happened in Louisiana, so what Jeff is saying, all of that money sat like that.
I got you. So now that all that stuff's in place,
Yes, sir.
where's this money?
Budget does.
That's all. Yeah.
Stop saying budget does, Michael.
No, these are budget clumps right here.
So, because so you have to treat all the money that is in the bond fund as if it is bond funds. So there is some balance in those funds. You're not complete with the bond projects at this point. You still have a couple of outstanding, MacArthur Road being one of them, as well as Cape Fear River Trail or the river.
So is the money
Cape
going to
Fear
be
River
shifted
Park.
to one of those? Is that what you're trying to get to?
It may be. Yes, that would be when we go to actually issue the debt on MacArthur Park. We will reduce the debt by the available funding in that
And
fund.
do you see what I'm saying? That the plans are already made before we have any input.
Yes, sir, but those funds,
I understand
that
it's got to
case-
be in that category, but you could have the river part. You've already decided where you're going to put it before. First of all, we didn't know it exists, and then so we'll get there. But please put K1 up there because you've got a couple others that I know are not part of those kind of things that are fair questions. I mean, this is budget is not a fun time, so nothing's personal. And old city hall renovations, $250,000. That's not a part of any kind of enterprise fund, to my knowledge. So we can revisit that. But if you could extract the ones that have enterprise obligations or come from grants, so that we know what we're actually dealing with, without saying where they already going to be used at. That's our rub.
And Mayor, that's one of the reasons too that we brought you all the CIP earlier. We brought you the CIP earlier. We said this is projects that we are envisioning that we, with our resources, will be able to complete over the next year. There were, and any time a project is added at council's request. We may recommend it's added. And even there are projects which we would say, we tell the departments, we want you to put a project out there even if there's no funding. Because if not, then you would never know that we are the least walkable city in North Carolina if you don't put out there that we need to have a
We're not anymore.
CIP. To your point, because again, somebody put it on the list and we started working that project. And so, but the CIP came to council earlier this year before the budget, and we kind of said, we want to lock this in. And so what we can do with answering these questions, but we definitely will do next year, is that when we bring the CIP, we may need a little bit more time than just presenting it to you on the projects to actually tell you, this is what we anticipate if we have fund balance or closed projects freed up, we would use this money, that money. And I think that may get to your interest.
Yeah, well, I think, thank you for that, first of all. But what I'm saying is that we don't have the whole picture because you hadn't brought the budget to us to know that we've got to now be looking to change some things, cut some things, add some things to get some things that council actually wants to get on here. And so when you brought the CIP and you had recommended closure projects, it would be real easy and simple if you showed that this money, just like you did on that list with the other closed out projects, it would have been good to include these to say that this money is being programmed over here. See, and then last thing I'll say about it, because I want this whole piece up here to be discussed, the OCS part that I talked about with Blue Street. So you're showing it as 650 in here, but it was 850 in the conversation, but it was an unknown number. And so you see how that plays into your decision making? If we got 1.8 or 9 left over from OCS, potentially for 32 days, I asked about specifics on the Blue Street. They told me it was about 850, but the CIP on K8 has 650. So that's $200,000. Yeah, it's $200,000 difference. Because right, unless I'm reading it wrong, it says Blue Street Senior Renovations, and it's got it as
which
an
page are you on?
unfunded. It's on K8, but it's not unfunded if you use closeout projects to fund it.
That's why, Mayor, we are bringing back the budgetary item to put this in place at this point. This was on the requested but not funded, so that when it was not included in the original recommendation, 650 was the initial estimate. Now we got design plans in, I believe, 2 weeks ago. We know what the value of that is and what the cost of that project's going to be. So now with the council action, we'll move from the unfunded list with the revised amount over to the funded list. So we can absolutely
There's a
bring
big
back.
difference between $200,000. So how I know that wasn't a 2-week change. How stale were these estimates?
I would have to go back.
Because you gave us this book a couple of weeks before you gave us the other book.
Yes, sir, and there's been a lot of work done on it, and I'd have to go back and look how the 650 got there.
Okay.
But we know that it is closer to 850 at this point, and I believe that's what the budgetary action is.
Okay.
And I believe also we looked at one time, we didn't include the lower building in the discussion, but the 850 would include the lower
But
building.
at what point do y'all check in with us to say, do y'all want to go this far?
Well, again, we brought it back to council at a work session.
But you brought me
And
650.
we will also bring back to you at your next council meeting an agenda item for you to approve or disapprove for appropriating that money for that project. So there are several check-in points for the council to approve that, because we, again, can't spend any money that council has not approved.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so what is the impact of a 2.5% cost of living combined with a one-time bonus of $1,500? That would actually end up costing us more in the long run than what, more next year than what the 4%, 1% 401k would be. It's about 5.2 million, so it's about $300,000 more than what's recommended.
Question.
Yes, sir.
On the original proposed budget, was the COLA for all sworn and non-sworn FFEs?
So we don't do a COLA. What we do is a merit increase. A COLA would be tied to inflation or some other metric.
Well, the 4%,
The
was that for
4%, it's
all sworn and non-sworn?
the 4 point, so if I may, the 4.9%, or $4.9 million is the cost of honoring your steps. Then for everyone that's not on a step program, 4% of midpoint. So all of the public safety employees that are not on steps would get the 4%. Every employee that is on a step would get their next step.
So is this slide commensurate to that?
It is.
How is this dollars more if the percent is 2.5 instead of 4, if it's the same?
Because 4% for some employees may not stretch to, or 2.5. So the additional 1.5% per employee is not worth $1,500. So in some cases, you're going to give 2.5%, and then $1,500 could be 5 or 6%.
I guess I should ask the question a different way. So I guess, could we have a breakdown of the 2.5% and then the 1,500 bonus separate, I guess?
So this was my question, and the reason that the genesis behind it was we used this before, because what's the total cost of raising the employee's wage by 4%?
It is, the total cost of the compensation is $4.9 million.
Okay, so 4.9 million, and that's a recurring number. Does that
Yes.
include the 1% to their
It does.
401k?
It does.
All right. So, Council, what I was saying was that you understand if you have to find 4.9 million of recurring money, you can't pay salaries off of, just one time. But what we did before was, and I ran the numbers for this. So there's 10% of the staff that makes over $100,000, right? Which means that 90%, so the median amount is somewhere 60,000, which equates to at 4% about after taxes $130-something a month. So the question was, if we took them up, still not messing with their match, because I understand that's retirement money, but because times are tight, a couple of years ago we gave them a one-time bonus, around November, December of like $1,700. It went a lot further, and we were able to get the money from a different source. We didn't have to find $4.9 million year after year after year. We were able to take, let's say, whatever it was, we were able to take, but the same premise is true. You found some one-time money, you're able to do it, and there was a lot more impact on getting that much money at one time, because by the time you add inflation into $130 a month, I mean, you really don't see the impact of that. So it was just a combination of two. One, you're still giving some step up in basis for cost of living, but they would actually have something tangible that they can appreciate, because $100 and something a month is appreciated, but it doesn't go as far as having access to a bonus.
So to achieve, Councilman, if I may, or Mayor, if I may, to achieve the effect you're referring to save the cost of that bonus, or to make a reduction in the total cost, what would occur is you would have to not do your step, because remember, your step plan was different in 2021 when you did that, and you had ARPA funds to do that with. You would not honor the step. You would hold every
police step.
Well, that's about probably more than 30% of your employees are in that step program. So to that step increase, if you wanted to change over to bonus, I'm just telling you what it would require for you to achieve savings around that. You would not honor the step. You would do a partial step and then make up the step difference, or to implement then the bonus as an addition to whatever that partial step is. In that, when you did that bonus last time, if I remember right, and I wasn't here, I just know I've read about it and looked at what the financial impact was, that your step system was different. And at that time, the city had not historically always funded the step increases. It changed over time. Some years you would fund steps, some years you wouldn't. And this is where the council has invested heavily over the last few years in putting everybody on their right step, because you had employees come in, they would get on a step, the year that step was honored, they would move up a step, but an employee who had been there longer, that steps weren't honored.
Yeah,
right?
But we added taxes to relieve the compression.
You did.
Twice.
But again, every time you move up a step, there's an added cost to that step, and that's the $4.9 million. That's why the manager, has recommended in your budget without a tax increase, recommended that we honor the steps and that we provide the compensation increases universally. Keep everybody on the steps as council has promised.
So the $4.9 million is paid for without any tax increase?
That is correct.
Okay, so then when you're saying that this is the recommended budget with the tax increase, it takes out of the equation any salaries?
Correct. If you said push back in everything that was there at that 1 penny, and you said you wanted to take that out of compensation, the compensation recommendation, that would be the direction. But you can attain as Councilman Hondras pointed out, with the cutting of some supplies and that kind of thing that we've listed in that one, the primary one being the parking revenue, that's the biggest chunk of it. You can fund current operations, employee pay increases, because the directors have said, we pay employees first, we will nip and tuck everywhere else, with no tax rate increase. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, are you proposing bonuses in lieu of percentages?
The question I had sent had both.
Okay.
It had that, but I just know that people's, they're feeling the pinch. So when you looked at what it sounds good to say that we did it, and if you're in the higher tier of the system, you feel it more than not. And so I was trying to see if it was a way you could get them something a little bit more tangible.
If I may, just the model that our state has shown us in terms of teacher pay bears out that overemphasis on those bonuses is shallow. Also, over time, it hurts.
I
the
can't speak for the state, and I don't
Uh,
emphasize on it.
Right on. Yeah. If we do go that route, I think we should insist on both and bonuses and percentage increases.
All right. Thank you. All right, sir.
All right. What would be the impact of lowering a half-cent or a three-quarter-cent contribution to the CIP? And this comes down to really a question for you as a council on which of those projects
Where's that list?
that
Mr.
list
Jeff?
is in the slides. It's actually in your slides today. So if you go back, and I know I'm running really fast for those of you watching, if you go to, what page is that in the presentation? I can find it too.
You got key CIP investments for additional penny. Where's the whole list of CIP that would be funded, that would be impacted if we change this?
So these would be the projects, unless you decided to. So this is what we are recommending with the additional pennies.
I'm not even talking about
Okay,
that.
right. But if you did not do the additional pennies,
Yep.
this would be staff's recommendation that these projects would not be done. If the council wanted to do these projects in lieu of other CIP projects and swap them out,
Let's stay on what we're talking about. Where's the list of projects that would be done without a penny? All of them, so that the council can then choose. You told me it was in this book. I don't see it.
so that is the projects.
Yep.
That is these projects. So you just don't.
That is
do-
these projects if you do it with a penny. Where's the projects if you don't do it with the penny?
It's the projects without these projects.
Okay,
So-
where's that list? The projects without these projects.
I don't believe we have the list without this. We can remove these projects from the list if you would like, Mayor, and give you that list. But the projects list, and I apologize if we did not give you a clearer list, but it is the list of projects that is in your CIP without these projects that are included. So we can go back and make a separate list if you would like to net out these projects and separate them.
So Jeff, there's one way to do it is to go to start, if you come over here, if you go to B1, I'm asking you and the team. If you go to B1 and anything that's showing up is recommended for FY '27, that is not on this list here, is what would be in the debate.
That is correct.
Okay.
So Mayor,
We will compile a better list.
We'll compile a better list for you, because again, some of these aren't the entire project, they are a portion of the project. They were top-offs or additional in that project or to fully fund the project as requested. So we'll provide a better list for you, and we can have that to you within a day or two. But to Doug's point, or the manager's point, it is literally the 27 recommended budget less these projects. So, sorry, now I know this is going to be dizzying for the folks watching it at home. Yes, sir. Increased fuel cost. The $10 increase in solid waste is really to cover the estimated increased cost of fuel. And that's where you see it primarily. Everywhere else, it's kind of baked into the budget. The fuel cost estimate, I believe it's right around $500,000 increase for next year in solid waste. What does it look like to spread City Hall renovations? The City Hall renovation budget is $108,000. Allocating over 2 years, it may reduce the budget next year by about $54,000, but it also reduce our ability to contract for that project.
So, question for you: are the plans designed? Is it ready to go?
Yes, sir. It's about to hit the street. Actually, we just did the page turn a couple of days ago, so it'll be on the street for advertisement here in the next few weeks. And that is
Are there
really,
any projects that money has been appropriated or encumbered that are still being designed? Because what's the gap rule for something coming out of this year's budget versus next year's budget. So in other words, like we did the Civil War history folks, right? You had a contract with them or,
Yes, sir.
or budget ordinance that said you had to do it. But we didn't have $6 million. We put it up over so many years. So what's the rule regarding whether you can pull it out of this year's money or next year's money?
Okay, so there's a couple of components to that. First of all, the gap rule requires that when you incur the liability, you have to recognize it. So in the case of this history museum, when you sign the contract, unless it had a non-appropriation clause or a termination agreement that didn't require you to pay it out, then you had to recognize the liability of the full contract. On an appropriation basis, which is really what we're dealing with more here, again, there are three types of budget ordinances that you have. The operating budget ordinance, which expires 1 year at a time. Capital project ordinances live for the life of the project. General statute requires that in order to contract for a project, you have to have the appropriation. The accounting standards through GASB require that when you as a council appropriate that funding, okay, and remember, we're not appropriating years 28, 29, 30, 31. Those are planning years. In 27, when you appropriate that funding, it has to be recognized on your financial statements as committed and obligated. There's a couple of various
whole
pieces.
thing?
Whatever you have obligated up to 27. Okay? So for next year, for instance, if you say we'll call it $108,000 for the City Hall renovation, and that's new to next year. What we would recognize on our books is that we have an appropriation of $108,000. That money is then spoken for. Without council authorization or without council approval to redirect that money, we can't redirect that money to another project. All right? So on your balance sheet, it shows up as committed funding. When you have a multi-year agreement, this gets to your question with LMG, and that's the very last question on here. So I apologize, I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. When you have an agreement, if that agreement is in whole, and says we're going to agree to $5.7 million, then that is obligated. Council has taken an action to obligate that money, and it is now committed, and on your balance sheet shows as being out of the appropriable bucket, right? As it's now allocated, it's not unallocated. If council chooses to break that up, so for instance, on Cape Fear Regional Theater, we said we're going to give $2.5 million over 5 years. $500,000, $500,000, $500,000. Your obligation then becomes $500,000 a year, because in that contract it says, in that agreement, if you don't appropriate it, we don't have to fund it. You as council have the ability to do that. So you see that show up year after year in your operating budget. If we had said we're going to do $2.5 million all at one time, you would have said, appropriated that to a capital project, a multi-year project. That money then would have been set aside, and it would no longer be available for appropriation. When you get to the contracting phase, it is then obligated as a liability. So that's on your balance sheet. You have liabilities, assets, liabilities, and for governmental accounting, particularly in the general fund, you have commitments. And that's what you're talking about is you create a commitment. We have to account for it separately. And there are various ways to mitigate that commitment with the changing in the language of the contract and changing it on how you appropriate it. Okay, I know it's a long answer to get there, but you asked kind of a complicated question,
right,
that gets into the balance sheet and the budgetary impacts.
Got it. What exactly are the renovations for City Hall for $108,000?
The $108,000 is to take what we lovingly call the vault, where Jennifer keeps all of her stuff, used to, and we are going to convert that into office space as we are trying to get out of the Festival Park office building.
And that lease is about $300,000 a year.
I believe so.
So where's the savings going to be recognized?
It'll be recognized in your operating budget probably in 28, because you're going to still be in there through 27, through next year, because we can't move everybody out. So we still have to pay that lease probably through the end of the fiscal year of 27. And if we're still in there, we'll have to pay some, but you wouldn't be able to realize that savings until the 28 budget.
All right.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I had to take a bathroom break. The previous slide with the $10 increase on the yard, solid waste for yard, or well, I guess just solid waste, right, for the fuel. So I appreciate the additional fuel costs. That was one thing I wanted in addition to corridors and OCS that I want to talk about in strategic planning that we never got to was these, the services in the solid waste, particularly the yard debris. So, well, all of it, but also yard. So in the, I think I think the residents expect, their expectation is if they have a city can, whether it's one of the two that was issued to them from the city or an additional one they purchased, because they're paying this annual subscription fee, that they're going to get their can, if it's damaged and needs to be repaired or replaced. And also looking at the acceptable lawn care reusable bags or containers. And I stated this the last time, I think we're at $235 or $245 a year. Now we're, with this $10 increase, we'll be at what, $275 or $285?
Is it 275 or 285?
It's going to go to $285. As we push up to, $300 a year, $25, $30 a month, there needs to be an opt-out service for the residents. Some residents are paying double because when it comes to yard waste, they have a landscaper that takes their debris away. They're subsidizing everybody else that's using the yard care service. So thank you. Just wanted to add that note for future discussion.
Absolutely, and we welcome the discussion on what services the council would like to see out of solid waste.
Question for you. All right, we're getting into a couple of things now. So B1, everything on B1, you said is funded without a tax increase, right?
Are you in the capital book or are you in
Capital book.
Everything on B1, with the exception of those projects which we outlined, in the 1 cent, 2 cent for capital, is funded at the current tax rates. That'd be correct.
Can you go back to that sheet?
The picture, or the
The one
slide?
you said everything but these.
And Mayor, we're going to get y'all a better list for that. We'll hope to get that out to y'all today.
So it would be starting on in your packet today. And Mayor, we can absolutely, like as Doug mentioned, we can put this on for Monday's work session and have this back, and we'll have it to you within the day on what that is. But that is page, starts on page of the handout today, starts on page 6 of your handout. So, but we, if it'd be okay, Mayor, let us give you a better list because I think that'll help just expedite the discussion.
All right, so two things. One, I want to add it to the parking lot just because I know we got to start cleaning up. In light of Goodyear closing, announcing the closing, we're trying to work to mitigate that. It shows us that our community and our workforce is vulnerable to changes, and so we don't have any money in here for workforce or next generation workforce development. I want council to consider maybe $100,000. We did it in the past. Mr. Colley's office was successful in creating, I can't remember the total number of general contractors, but even speeches at this weekend at some of the graduations by the tech folks said, if you don't want to be impacted by technology change, you need to have more electricians or more plumbers being made. So that general contracting course, if it was expanded to include licensed plumbers, licensed electricians, I think we got some potential there for it. Not to mention the city and the county and hospital and the community colleges and colleges have been meeting on a kind of a next generation workforce. How do we make sure we're all prepared? But I definitely want to see something recognized for the city for that, so we can hash out how we get there. But I wanted it as a placeholder for that.
And we can absolutely do that, Mayor. And I just remind you that last year, or in 26 this year, there was some money added during the reconciliation process with council and the parking lot for economic development. So we'll bring you also where that money has been spent, with the idea that we can also carry that money or change the purpose of that money between years if it has not been spent in this year. So I believe there was some aerospace development money last year that we will have to check on to see how that's been spent. So we may be able to get to your point, to get to your exercise without having to add revenue or do something without having to tap into other sources to do that. Sales tax, based on the latest, we've discussed that pretty much at length earlier. Again, we're probably being a little bit more aggressive than the league, and based on our conversations over prior years, Mayor, we recognize that is an interest. So we believe we pushed that number as far as we can at this point to be responsible. And then the LMG agreement and the
Let
state.
me make sure council understands this. So council, as he explained to us, when you make an agreement, that money comes out of the equation. It's $6 million. I think Mr. Floats is moving, and I think the attorney will brief us on where that is. I'm confident that it's moving forward, but just don't know if he needs all $6 million this budget year. And so if there's a different arrangement can be made with him, that could unlock, I'm saying because he still has to have his stuff designed and started and built, it may unlock half of that money, which is $3 million going back into the equation for us to help meet some of these other needs. And that's just a matter of taking action that aligns with an agreement with him. And so I wanted that added to the discussion, which is why I sent it in as a question, because we may not need to set aside a whole 6 this year. Make and do 2, 2, and 2, or 3 and 3, and it'll give us some capacity. So that's what this one was all about.
So, and you're exactly right, Mayor. The only thing I would suggest is that when you consider that funding is one time in nature. So, but going back kind of to our fiscal sustainability principle, ideally, council wouldn't use that for operations. If you were going to use that, you could use that for capital or something to that effect that's a one time in nature. You wouldn't want to plug that back and fund operations with it. So I just wanted to be sure that there's clarity around where that funding came from in the original equation and the original discussion and how we got to that. So with that, how has the police department's annual budget changed in recent years? So this is the budget comparison, personnel services. You can see going across the top, you see the jumps where we made the increases in 24, 25, and 26, going from 24 to 25, 25 to 26, and so forth. Then how has the Office of Community Safety's annual budget changed in the recent years? This is a similar question to the one we debated or talked about earlier. How many pennies on the tax rate does it cost to unfreeze 38 police positions? So we've had a lot of different variations of this question. So what we wanted to do for you as a council is just give you a chart. You can scale up and scale down as you see fit to get to your math. So one officer is $136,882. That's the full cost. We don't have sufficient vehicles any longer to purchase for those to have to have surplus vehicles for those new officers. We would have to acquire those as we went through and as they came on. So that's the fully loaded cost. This is scaled all the way down to 38. That's 2.17 cents if you were to restore all. If you wanted to fully fund the Office of Community Safety, this is John Jones, the department's request prioritized. So again, this is scalable. You just start at the top, work your way down to where you want to draw the line. So, or none or all, your choice. And that's the tax rate increase impact across the side there. And then the same thing on the firefighters. Keep in mind that based on our current class structure and working with the fire chief, we will be having some dialogue about how those positions come on over the year, because traditionally when we had overhire positions, those were made up with vacancy savings. So what that allowed us to do is the chief could bring on a class knowing he was going to have a certain number of firefighters leave, and it would offset. We're not seeing people leave as fast. So when we do a whole class, we have firefighters sitting and waiting, and we're paying them at this point to wait for an opening on shift. So one of the things that we've had some conversation about is what is our practice related to those in our recruitment classes and the number of academies we run a year. And the chief and I had this same conversation yesterday. When you have a high number of vacancies or anticipated vacancies, you can continually run and fill academies because you know you're going to use them. When we are getting closer to fully staffed, you have to strategize about how many academies and how often you run your academies and what you do with those folks if there's not a place on shift for them. So that'll be sans funding for those additional firefighters, for those additional positions. We would have that conversation with the chief about how do we meet our personnel budget while maintaining some version of a list for attrition through the year. So I just wanted to there's a little bit more nuance on the fire side because these positions are are funding overhires. So,
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
So I started asking this earlier, and we probably don't have the answer today, but maybe for next week. So I know the state requires a mutual aid agreement, right, for fire. So
does.
our firefighters have to go sometimes outside the city limits. Sometimes the volunteer or the common, what is it called, the combo, they got some paid, some volunteer fire departments may help us within the city limits. And I think we compensate with them. We compensate them for that. I think.
I would have to let the chief answer those questions on the mutual aid agreements.
I just want to get the question out. If he can answer today, that's great. If not, maybe for a future. I think like Stony Point is one where maybe we're contracting services, some of the annexed areas. But then do we have a way to get a handle on what it costs FFD, what it costs the city to provide fire services outside the incorporated city limits, and how, if any, reimbursement are we getting?
Okay, real quick, we don't have folks waiting on a spot on shift. They're all on shift. Even though they're in overhire positions, they're working, so we're not just paying them. You've got two separate issues.
Yes, sir.
We pay, the contracts you see we pay are 10 cents on the $100 taxable property value for areas we have annexed and cannot cover due to fire station locations. That's state law, that's annexation law. So that's what those contracts are for. Mutual aid, automatic aid agreements are to benefit people and our firefighters. If we were to go to the county and say, hey, if you want us to come out there, you're going to have to pay us, they would simply take us off the run cards, which would put their firefighters and citizens at risk. So that would be bad business. But what else can I answer for you?
Well, and I don't disagree with that. My comment isn't really to stifle the partnership, right? It's if anything, to strengthen it. So I remember a partner city, one of our sister cities here in the county, they sent essentially the county a bill saying, hey, we're getting reimbursed X. Let's just say for round numbers, it was $200,000. Our actual expenses are $600,000. We would love to continue providing service if you pay us the full reimbursed amount. And the county, to your point, opted to service those areas a different way.
We do collect some revenue from areas of the county that they can't protect. There's a small area on Morganton Road in the Bonnie Doon area. There's some area off north end of Murkison Road that's still county, and a little bit from the Lafayette Village, Lake Rim areas.
Sure.
So it's all reciprocal, or however you want to call it. If there's property that cannot be protected by a county fire department but can be protected from a city, they pay us the 10 cent on the $100 property tax per parcel.
Yeah.
But the automatic aid agreements that's different.
Okay. Well, and I appreciate that context, but our fiduciary is to our taxpaying residents. So, I think we owe it to them to ask the question and ask to be reimbursed, right? So the county can opt not to, but
there's a lot of county fire departments that come into the city and don't get reimbursed. So it goes both ways.
well, is there a way to see if that's apples to apples, or if our taxpayers are expending more?
Sure. I can pull up how many times we go into the county to provide life-saving service. But
Well, I think, and the genesis of the question, and the resident brought it out to my attention, was that, hey, they changed the sales tax distribution, so the city's losing 8 to 13 million a year on sales tax. Certainly, they can reimburse for some of these expenses where maybe previously it wasn't as necessary. But now that we're hurting, instead of saddling our taxpayers with a 3 additional cent ad valorem tax rate, maybe the county can participate in some of that.
personal opinion, if you start asking for reimbursement, they'll take us off the run cards. People in peril will suffer.
Okay.
And county departments will cover that area from a longer distance.
All right. Thank you for that.
All right. So, Mr. X, you had a next slide you were going to, right?
Yes, sir. One thing, and I'll add to what the chief said real quick. The way to think of fire service in the county is as a fabric. Each thread then holds together each fire response area and each fire response unit as part of that fabric. So when you start pulling on the thread, you can unravel the system and it won't cover as much. So when you look at fire service and prior places, we had as many as 18 volunteer fire departments, including a municipal service. Every one of those are located and structured such that they cover the entirety of the population. So it's a give and take. And to the chief's point, if you started looking at runs in and out, my guess is they roughly net. But I think to the question that your resident asked you, Councilman, the fire you don't focus in on fire exactly that way. You focus in on fire as a fabric, and emergency response is a fabric. So, and I'll go.
When he talked about fabric, it brings me, we all kind of share resources and responsibilities. Like the county has a command unit, so when we have large fires or fires that need rehab, we call the command unit. They don't charge us for it. Air units are the same way. If our air unit's broke, we call the county. They come in, they fill our bottles. They don't charge us for it. We do the same for them. So that's where that gets muddy.
Thanks, Chief. All right, so question, how many pennies on the tax rate to cost to fund drone as first responder? This is pretty self-explanatory. To the point where we've had some conversation, but not completely, the personnel costs to go with that, because it's not necessarily just the drones, it's the people to run the drones, operate them, and the infrastructure to maintain them, and so forth. So the estimate would include not just the contract for services, but the bigger chunk of that, which is at this point 6 additional police officers.
Now, question. Are these positions just to run the drone and the drone first responder, or would these police officers be doing other tasks?
If you were using drones as first responder, it'd be a 24/7 operation, which these folks would be tasked with operating those.
Chief, you got a minute to kind of explain that? And then my understanding too is that one of the proposed companies they were looking at had an incentive where they would give the first year if there was subsequent years. Mm-hmm. So what is the average amount that it equates to?
That would be about a couple $100,000 a year annually for that lease. It's a lease, so you would pay for that drone, and then if it crashes, they would replace it. So I'll let the chief answer for the operational side.
So these are 6 full-time FTEs that only do nothing but wait on the first responder drone. What are they doing the rest of the 40 hours a week?
No. So because of we're building this real-time crime center. So we would be able to phase in a full-time, but they won't be only doing that specifically. And the way we have our structure right now, because we have folks that are responding in the field with the drones, but also patrol as well. So it would be a phase-in approach in terms of how we're going to approach the real-time crime center, where we would have 24/7 operations.
All right, thank you, Councilman Jones.
Thank you so much. So the operators you have now here, they have secondary responsibilities already? Because I know you said we've been using this, excuse me, for over 10 years. So there, you have something in place, now you're desiring to build it out.
That is correct. But the also the flexibility with the DFR program also gives us the ability to put non-sworn or professional staff also in those positions, so it won't be as expensive. And when you're talking about that DFR,
So computer people, tech
it's
people,
folks that sit at a desk and deploy the drones,
like CSI people.
could be, or intel analysts. Yes.
Thank you. Then quickly, just so we can move on, that's why I put it on the board for me personally. But in your opinion, in lieu of, I know we can't necessarily do 38 at one time. In your opinion, if this was permitted, the council moved forward, would this, I don't want to say suffice, but would this help move you forward in lieu of X amount of positions, whatever it's equivalent to, maybe 5 to 10 or something like that, based on the tax rate?
Based on the statistics and the reviews that we're having from other cities that are actually deploying these drones are able to respond and be able to clear calls that an officer would not have to. So I couldn't give you a specific number, but we are showing that it is an effective tool to be able to clear calls as well.
All right, thank you so much. I know there's other aspects to that, but that's why I wanted it out there. Thank you, sir.
Councilman Miller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, want to express concern. CSI is one analogy. Minority Report, that movie, is another analogy. Should be concern and caution in how fast we move, especially in the use of surveillance tech. I know we're going to talk about that next week and standards around that. Can we have, I think, for everybody to hear just the numbers that are attached to the Real-Time Crime Center and the other improvements that we want to make on the surveillance tech side?
When you say the numbers to the Real-Time Crime
dollar
Center.
dollar amounts. I think you can fit the entire OCS budget just in the increases that we're seeing for the police budget for next year, if I'm not mistaken. But I would like to hear specifically what the dollar amounts are that are attached to the Real-Time Crime Center, to drone technology, if that's something that we're pushing in this cycle, and other surveillance tech. Fusus, we've talked about it too.
Yes, sir.
Fusus, the Clearview AI. I think that includes
some
the
of those
ShotSpotter.
things, so like Fusus, that is a program, it's a voluntary program where the average citizen that wants to be able to provide police access to their Ring doorbell camera if there's a crime and we are looking for information regarding that. That's what Fusus does. It is nothing where it's not a surveillance technique. It's just giving citizens the ability to provide that video coverage back to us when we're trying to locate a suspect that actually committed a crime in their area. So it's not an additional surveillance. It's what citizens already have. Everyone has cameras. Everyone has Ring cameras. So we're just utilizing that as an entity to be able to provide us back information when needed.
Yeah, and could I just make the request just from the staff in this process, a rundown of all of those technology systems, whether we call it surveillance or not, those ones that we've listed already quite a few times, the Fusus, the Clearview AI, the ShotSpotter, the dollar amounts, and this is not a hit on you, but we spent about 10 minutes splitting hairs on a much smaller budget on OCS. And what we're proposing is spending a couple more $1 million on improvements to police that include some surveillance tech that not all of our public is okay with, and a lot of us have concerns with.
Yes, sir. And one of the things that I'd just like to just share in terms of when we talk about budget and other entities, when you talk about fire and police, we are a 24/7 operation. When citizens call, we are there 24/7. There's nobody that's going to respond to the park at 3 o'clock other than the police. When there's a question, if there's something, there's no one else. So there's going to be a cost associated. That's why we're going to have that elevated cost. But many times, as we've already seen in terms of social services, when we talked about the juveniles, when we talked about homeless, bottom line is we're going to be the ones that's going to respond when that call comes.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Councilman McMillan. Chief, how many, notwithstanding the 38 positions, how many officers do you have working in your department?
Right, we're slotted for 459, but are we talking about, what do we?
That's good.
Yes, sir.
So you got 459, almost 460. How many in Office of Community Safety? Employees, FTEs? Six. So 459 and six. Their budget is going to be different because the workforce is different. The biggest piece on there is the personnel and salary, and not a single person in OCS, as he said, if there's a mass shooting at the mall, it's going to be the first call that responds to that. So they do different things. The problem is that we always make the conversation this versus that, versus a both. That, you know, if it justifies you do it, because he don't have 50% of his budget left over with 32 days to go. So there's going to be questions. But also, you take into consideration the OCS, and there's 6 people that work in there are new. So you don't have a full view of the expenses. But we pit it against each other and then say that we want to compare. You can't compare it. It's a tenth of it because the workforce is a 15th of it. So I mean, or more, 20th. So, but he's got about 3 or 4 more slides.
If I may respond to that, Mr. Mayor.
Quickly.
Yeah.
So you said it. I'm
again,
responding to what you responded to.
Again, if you don't want to pit it, I understand against each other, but it is important to have context in these conversations.
Agree.
It's apt to point out that we spent 10 minutes splitting hairs on a much smaller budget.
How long we talk about the police
on an
every
expansion
night?
program? That's a valid point.
How long you talk about the police every night?
And if we're making this expenditure on public safety, we're trying to be comprehensive. It is important to expand in the areas that we want to, but if nobody in the room is questioning the overwhelmingly large amounts that we are spending on the police budget, if nobody is scrutinizing that, then I think we're falling short of our job. And that goes into some of the tools that we're using that the public already has concerns about. We don't want to create infrastructure. We wake up overnight, 10 years from now, realizing we put all these things in place at an extreme cost without any type of oversight.
Thank you, Councilmember. Go ahead, Mr. Yates. We've got to get out of here.
Our next question, how does 1, 2, 3, 4% increase cost? I think Councilman Hondros, you're alluding to this question earlier. So we just gave you, as with everything else, because we've had variations on this, we gave you a chart starting with a 0.5% all the way through the 4%, and then we gave you the cost of the steps and a full step versus a half step. And the recommendation, of course, is the 4% plus the full step.
So let me ask you this to this point. Now, my understanding is that we funded to create the step plan because their advances and their promotions and the compensation is based on time, not just like everyone else in the organization. They have a different path. Is that correct? That the people on the step plan. So in other words, this is why you had compression, because you front end loaded bonuses. People came on, they were at a certain level. People who had been there did not advance as fast. Is that fair?
That's fair.
All right. So with that being said, earlier you said that if you don't provide the 4%, if you do bonuses or a combination of, it throws off the step. So is the step now going to make it impossible that or require you to always give a 4% recurring increase, or it throws it off? Because I thought they were on two different advancements.
They are. So you have 2 sets of employees. So for the purpose of the conversation, you have step employees and you have pay plan employees, right? Yep. Non-step employees. The sworn officers, not all the sworn positions are on step. Mm-hmm. Then if you were to say, we don't want to give 4%, but we only honor the steps, then the step employees would move up whatever that step is. Then all the other employees in the organization would be different. So one of the the conversation then to the point is, if you were trying to, for instance, pay only public safety, give only public safety an increase, you would still have to fund portions of the 4% because not all people in the police department that are
get a step.
sworn are on steps. So you have this mixed plan, right? And not all plans are every year. You get a step. Some are based on performance and based on certifications and that kind of stuff. So when we say that, you only grab up a small portion of the group if you only do steps. There is an additional portion, whatever group you choose, that is in the 4%. So yes, you can separate them. You won't have the outcome. You won't have an equitable outcome throughout the organization or even within a department.
What was the proposed budget? In the proposed budget, the 4% plus the 1%, what was that for sworn, non-sworn?
So the 4%, 1% includes the step increases, honoring all the step increases. For those who would not get 4%, they would get their step. So that fully funded compensation.
So you did it either or anyway. So they didn't get step plus 4. It was you get 4 or you get your step.
They got their step in lieu of. Right.
Right. So why
Absolutely.
was that different from my calculation?
Because in your if it's not different than your calculation, with the exception that in the 4% recommendation and honoring the steps, everybody that's not a step employee would get a 4% increase. When you look at your recommendation, the question you asked, and I'm sorry for calling it a recommendation, it was a question. The question you asked was around the 2.5% and $1,500. So some of those steps, because they're not based on percentage, a 2.5% COLA, if you will, doesn't necessarily
But
honor the full
if
step.
they're not included in the 4%, why would you include them in the 2.5%?
Because your question was not. If that was the intent of the question, we missed it.
Yeah,
So
I don't want to include it in the
if you want to
calculation for
exclude
my
all of
question,
the
and
steps-
it's not included in yours because yours is one or the other, correct?
Well, we broke it out so you could see. So in this version, if you looked at this and you said, then the council said, we want to do 2.5% for all employees that aren't on steps. That cost is $2.2 million. If we want to honor the steps, that's an additional $1.8 million. Those are two groups. What you would then have is step employees within the public safety ranks would get their step, which may or may not be 2.5%. Then all the other public safety employees within that department would only get the 2.5. So there would be these two groups. That's why we push them all together typically, so that we honor the steps and meet that, and we also do the 4%. We don't normally parse between steps and percentage basis, so that everybody in the organization is benefiting the same. So that's from when we read the question, and the way we read the question, again, I apologize if we didn't seek clarification or weren't clear on what you're asking for, is at 2.5%, depending upon how you do the bonus and everything, then the step employees don't get the bonus?
Do it the same way that you. So what you just asked him, answered his question, is that the 4% that you recommended in the recommended budget is in lieu of the step. You don't get 4% and the step for those who would qualify, correct?
That is correct. That's
okay.
That's
so
how our pay plan is structured.
I want you to take that same calculation and instead of the number 4, use 2.5. See what I'm saying?
And I think he did.
Well, he said that it threw off his step.
And so I want to make sure I understand the question because it's ultimately going to make sure that I can work with Jeff and the team to we get it. In the budget, any employee who is not on a step plan, doesn't matter what rank, if you're not on a step plan, the recommended budget included 4% of midpoint and a 1% increase on 401k contributions for those who don't currently, are not mandated to get to 5%.
Right.
Your question was, don't touch the folks who are on the step plan.
Just like you did.
Don't touch the folks on the step plan. Just go to the folks who would have normally got the 4% and calculate what would it look like if they got 2.5% of midpoint and $1,500 of a one-time bonus.
Correct.
And I just need to confirm that that's the number, and they're confirmed. But I think that was what was on the slide. And if that's not, then we'll come back and we'll run that number
Well,
for you.
while they're conferring also, because we're just trying to understand the numbers, right? So the proposed budget's 4% plus the 1% for 401K was a cost of, or funding amount of 4.9 million, right?
Yes.
So that's what's, because now you got 4% here without a 1%. I mean, you got 4% at 3.1, and you got a total of 5.2. I don't understand.
Well, there are separate questions that you asked, and there's separate questions that people have asked.
Right.
And so whoever asked about a half step, and I guess this is for a half step of police because, or is this a half step of
It
step
took us
plan?
too long to fix that. That's complicated if you start.
Well, I mean, that was a
half-
question that
I
was posed.
understand.
So Jeff, how did you hear what we were saying?
I heard some of it, so
Well, that's not my question. I don't want to bother the step because it took too long to get that straightened out.
we will redo our calculation and
confirm.
provide clarity because I think
Because if you could, when you provide that back, you know how many employees we have in the organization. So can you tell me what $1,500 a one-time payment would equal?
So-
dollar-wise.
let me be sure I have it because your question was COLA and 1,500. So the clarified question would be to honor the step plan plus provide a $1,500 one-time bonus for all step employees and all employees
No, not. I don't think that there
and
was.
2.5% for non-step
No,
employees.
I think I've
It's
got it.
treating it the exact same with the same
got it.
assumptions that you treated it for here.
I got it.
You didn't include step. We're not talking about that because if someone earns a pay increase because they got a certification or they put the time in and they get a $10,000 pay increase, that's something that they earned. I'm not trying to impact that. And neither you didn't calculate it into your 4%, correct?
When we broke it out in answering this question, we broke it out in the manager's recommended budget. It is included. So the $4.9 million that you saw in your budget includes the money for the steps, 4% for all the employees, and
But
1% for the 401k.
That's just the total amount to do all of those things.
Correct.
You didn't take the step folks and include them in the 4% calculation. Is my point.
No, they didn't get their step plus
All
4%.
right. So don't include them in the calculation for
So
my
you-
question.
you want for your question, you want to exclude the step employees.
Just like you did. I want to use the exact same modeling that you did.
So Jeff, what it is if
This can't be that complicated. So you didn't include it. I'm not asking to
So
include.
for the employees that would get 4%, forget any step employees,
Right.
step plan employees. For the employees that would get 4%, run the numbers of what that would look like if they got 2.5 of midpoint. It's not a
Plus.
COLA. 2.5 midpoint
Plus.
plus $1,500.
Yeah.
And just compare, and I think that we can get that for you quick, fast, in a hurry. And I
Yes.
think that's what's on that, I think that was I think that's what we did, but we'll come back.
We did a little different based on the question, but
we'll come back.
All right.
we
Sorry if I
clarified the
wasn't clear.
question so we can get you a better
Okay.
answer.
All right. Thank you.
How much would a $500, $1,000, and $2,000 bonus cost for sworn and non-sworn? So this would be in addition to, or however you wanted to, but this would be all employees within the non-sworn group getting it at those levels, which to some of your question, Mayor.
Okay, I see.
And sworn employees, if you were to do this, and this ignores the steps for a moment, ignores the 4%. This is just an outright calculation of one-time payments, 500, 1,000, 1,500, and 2,000. Again, because we had multiple questions, we wanted just to give you a calculation. So this is numbers of employees times bonus. What are the expenses or another appropriation? I believe, Councilman Hare, this was your question. So this is an outline of that. Health premiums for retirees are a big one. The salary and 401k increases, the 4.9 million. You can see under miscellaneous in this slide, the efficiency savings, the 8.9. All of our transfers to the other funds, general government, all the capital funds, plus our transportation, Fund 61, our transit system, Fund 61 and 63, not-for-profit payments, and our fuel inventory. cost. So this kind of walks you through all the different components. Phone bills not specifically credited to a department, rents, etc. So we'll be happy to kind of walk back through any of the questions you have around this. But this is, again, fund level expenditures that don't necessarily tie exactly to a department or a direct service provision, but are in support of the city and the council. Well, how much is a 0.5% reduction worth on the 27 balanced budget? So you can see this would be across the board, and we can provide this in more detail just within the general fund. But this is based on the 322 million. But if you take, for instance, police and fire out of the equation because they are a big chunk, you would net about $1 million. I believe, Councilman Jones, this was your question from yesterday. And we can narrow that if you would like to just general fund, but this just gives you an order of magnitude. So parking lot items. Tiffany was gracious enough to write these up there for you, but these are our parking lot items at this point. We have Langdon Street, housing needs assessment of $71,000. This week we'll know if we believe we're going to have additional money left over from our other studies to help take that off the board. The convention center study, I believe that number, we got confirmation today that that's probably closer to $100,000. Andrew, is that right? So that can change. 910 Fest at $350, Dogwood Festival at $750. These are just the asks that we've heard, so that's not exactly, just wanted to put them on the board for discussion. Then the downtown manager at about $150,000. And then all the additions that you guys have added to today.
And there was one for Brendan, not trying to hash it out because I know everybody's ready to go, but something in there, even if it's not funded, but just tracking to maybe get on the CIP, on the council's radar, some type of community center for the West, something comparable to here, because they're having to drive 30 minutes across town. Plus, and that ties into the transit, so I'm hoping that Ms. Neal's transit aspirations are in there for getting service to the West. I know that it was a transfer station and as well as some routes, but I don't know if that's in transit's budget. I hadn't dug that deep in there, but it needs to be something that we
It is
can
not
hash out.
included in any of the budget that you have in front of you.
Yeah.
It was in the discussion last week around what's the future of transit. But I put in West Service Center. Does that kind of meet?
So to be
What's your
West
expectation?
Community Center, but like I was saying, as we've talking about that, I know we can hash that out again. Make sure you put something on there about transit route expansion to the West.
Okay, when you say community center, do you mean service or do you mean like a rec center?
I mean, like, we've put all of our assets and resources in the inner city, like Orange Street, Murchison Road. West residents are paying for that, but they don't have anything comparable out there. So started talking to her. I wanted to talk to any of the representatives out there to let's put something on here that we're tracking, even if it's putting up $50,000 or $100,000, just so that it's on the radar as we identify what that looks like. But it's unfair to have 45,000 people have to come this far in to get services.
Yeah, thank you,
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor. I also want to make sure that it is in the discussion to actually visit the western expansion of the transit system.
Yeah.
Right, good. I'm going to go ahead and add to the list of things to cut this surveillance tech, specifically Flock, which is a license plate recognition system, specifically Clearview AI, which is a AI facial recognition system that's already in use. I want to have some very transparent conversations around what this is and what we're spending on it.
All right. Thank you, sir. And next week will be just as spicy as this one, if not more, I'm sure. But just to make sure I'm clear, some of the do-outs that I want to make sure are included, we were talking about the possible amendment of the PCH agreement to free up some of that bandwidth if it was stretched out. Not PCH, Peter Floats is
So
LMG, yeah, LMD.
when you say discussing it, then this may be
between now and next week, or sometime
This may be
between?
something that we may want to have the conversation with the city attorney, because I'm not sure there's a budgetary discussion related to
Well,
that as much as there is a contractual.
It'll come after any agreement or potential agreement. So, if there's an understanding obtained with LMG that they don't need all of their money, then that will maybe unencumber a good portion of that $6 million to be used this year. So that's
Mr.
why
Mayor.
that's why it's relevant.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that I think Jeff is trying to say is, and we're happy to present that to you, but a commitment made to loan him money is just that, a commitment. And the reason that it's showing up from fund balance is that we have options. If you were to say we don't wish to fund it from fund balance, then Jeff may be able to, I hate that you would borrow money to loan money to somebody else, but we were trying to cash fund that obligation. I mean, but literally, that's why it shows up there. Now, one of the things that we can do, and I'm glad you roped in the city attorney. I know on next week, we had a desire to ask council for a closed session on some other matters pertaining to the attorney, and we may have greater clarity around some of this as well that we can share at that time. But we have your question, we do.
Yeah. All right. And
Alibi, Mr. Mayor.
sir.
I think there was a lot of consensus from the staff, or excuse me, from the council when we had the child care group come in and talk about what the city could do to partner with them and increase child care facilities and support. And would like to talk about that in this time of the year rather than just observe it.
All right.
Sorry.
So we got it. I think and then y'all have to do outs to the questions that we had today. So council, we missing anything? All right. So good meeting. We'll see you next Thursday. I know we got some hungry staff members, and so I don't want to get in between them and lunch. I'm sorry.
I'm going to save this for next week, so.
Say what, the lunch?
budget.
Yeah. So coming out, the city manager's part of it. So all right. Y'all motion to adjourn, y'all? All right.
No, sir, I don't want